Booth.
Today, September 13th, it is 7:03 p.m.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So to speak.
I would like to make note that we're receiving there's July 20. The town has been alerted by the Veterans Services Department of the recent passing of two veterans. I'd like to call that letter of condolence addressed to the family. Mr. Chester S. Shore, who is passing on August 9th, 2022. Shore served in the United States Army service in the 655th Field Artillery Battalion, combat engagements in the Philippines during World War II. We're also involved through the attention to recent passing of Mr. Robert F. O'Grady, 13th of August 2020. Mr. O'Grady served in the United States Army European operations in the service of the Medical Corps for combat engagements in the Rhineland. And from passing of these two veterans agent notes that we have now lost two additional greatest generation. I'd like to offer a moment of silence to kind of memory. One other item I'd like to call to this evening. One section from regulations of the town council. So, citizen comments. Greenlawn Town Council encourages citizens to citizen comment period at the end. Anyone may comment at this time. Comments and or urgings on individual council members or council members. All information responded to the date available at the time. Public response. Responses shall be limited to the question at hand. The President shall have the discretion to declare a question comment look at it. Subject to declaration may be. We appreciate your attention this evening. Themselves appropriately and statements of first item on our agenda is the approval of minutes from previous meetings. We have two sections. May 24th. Note that that's the appropriate. Given that, I would
Motion to approve.
there's a motion
Four.
We have four. We can still no longer use the minutes. Someday that. Matt's on?
Yeah, he did. But I can put it on.
We'll continue that.
Mr. President, if I could, if you can hear me, I can hear all counselors but you, so I don't know where we are on the agenda.
We'll hold up on the approval of that. We also have the meeting minutes for August 2nd. So, second. Motion second. Is further discussion? Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
I'm not sure if I was present for that.
No,
meeting.
abstain. Mr. Wood?
I have you. Said you were.
Okay, yes.
Yes. Mr. Wood
Abstain.
and Mr. Rushton?
I'm sorry, Debbie, which meeting minutes are we voting on?
August 2nd.
Okay, yes.
That's 8-0.
Abstain.
Confirmations we have, citizens before. As a citizen, you care for the rest of the council, step forward and identify yourself, my name and street, and what belongs to.
Hello, Taylor Sullivan, 250 Norland Park. I am here to express my opposition to the ordinance brought forth by Councillor Wood and Councillor Chase. Councillor Wood has been attempting to overturn the ban on retail marijuana since its inception back in 2018. Each of you before me knows the harms of marijuana, and you all know the devastating effects that it has on adults, on young people, and on families. So I'm not going to waste my time up here for the 100th time, unfortunately, spewing all of that out again. Retail marijuana makes marijuana more accessible for all, and our society is paying the price for it. While the rich owners of these dispensaries are getting wealthier, all backed by big marijuana, those people that struggle every day with addiction and are truly sick are getting sicker, and they're getting more addicted. Addiction for profit is never a way to fund a town. No matter what, it's not worth it. I'm going to read you an excerpt from a mom in a group that I am a part of. Her name's Laura Stack. My son Johnny was born in February of 2000 in Colorado. He was happy, he was handsome, he was talented, he was extremely intelligent. He even got a perfect score on his SAT. He loved animals, video games, school, the beach. He even got a full scholarship to college, had a 4.0 GPA. He was perfectly normal, handsome, and bright. When recreational marijuana was legalized in Colorado, suddenly it was everywhere. It was easy for him to get. I couldn't keep his hands off of it. He started smoking at first, then he later started dabbing, which is available at all the shops, Panacea, I know you've mentioned, down the street. It's a high THC wax extract. It caused him bizarre episodes of marijuana-induced psychosis. He told me when he was truly struggling, I need to tell you, you were right, Mom. I'm sorry I gave you so much trouble about the marijuana. You told me it would hurt my brain. I didn't believe you, but I'm here to admit it ruined my mind and it has ruined my life. 3 days later, Johnny committed suicide. Johnny's parents, Laura and John, have been on a mission for years now and have started a nonprofit called Johnny's Ambassadors to educate parents, teens, government about the dangers of commercializing marijuana and high THC marijuana on the adolescent brain. I encourage the 8 of you to attend Marijuana Anonymous meetings. In fact, I'm going to send you a link to the information tonight when I leave, because I have to leave shortly. I'd also encourage you to attend Maranon meetings to get the perspective of families that deal with marijuana addiction in their home. It will truly open your eyes to the pain that marijuana commercialization has caused many people and families. And this is if you haven't experienced it in your own family. And if you haven't, you're very lucky. Marijuana retail has no place in Bridgewater. You were elected to make decisions, and we've trusted you in that. You have the power to make this decision. We don't need to go for a vote. It's not a popularity contest. It's a safety issue. It's a health issue. Your decisions here are going to make an impact on a family, on a kid who's not going to get a hold of it. And even though they can go down to Panacea or they can go to Brockton, if we don't have it in our town, there's less drugs in our town. And you all are in control of that. And I specifically ask you, Mr. Wood, to really educate yourself. It's not all about dollars. It's not worth the money. The choice is yours, and it's a very obvious one. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vernon Domingo, Saddle Drive, 36. I speak tonight to urge Town Council to acknowledge and recognize the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day. The ground on which Bridgewater exists is taken on land taken from Indigenous people. The Wampanoag who have lived here for 9,000 years, suffering hardships and death from English colonizers. Despite all of that, Indigenous people still live here in our area. We, the present residents of Bridgewater, need to acknowledge their residents and their history. An acknowledgement from this council on Indigenous Peoples' Day in October would function as a living celebration of Indigenous communities, healing and helping us to deal with their trauma. The recognition of Indigenous Peoples' Day can help us build authentic relationships with Indigenous peoples in our area and beyond, respecting and learning from their culture. An acknowledgement like that is a good start. It is a recognition that will cause some discomfort, I know, but we need to recognize that Indigenous people have suffered discomfort for way too long. We need to share in the Indigenous people's discomfort while they still continue to suffer. So recognizing Indigenous Peoples' Day is a start. We have to start someplace. It's better than none at all. And according to Kate Bean of the Santee Dakota, we have to try starting out with good intentions, and a good heart is what matters most. I hope you consider this seriously. Thank you.
Aisha Hussain, 40 Sophia Lane, Bridgewater. I live on this street, little lane off of Elm Street. And for Pete's sake, have a little crumb of care for us. We want to live in peace. We do not want any children getting addicted in this town. I don't have younger children. My kids are grown up, but I live on the lane. That's going to cost everybody their security, their safety issues. Please don't do that to us. And how many more times do we have to keep coming here, keep on crying to tell you guys to stop it? Please stop it. No amount of money over this venomous thing for the new generation is going to benefit this town. Enough is enough. I had a work day, I had to cook, I have to clean weed from my lawn, but I made it a point to come here today again. Please stop it. Please stop this. If it's going to increase the amount of children going to college more in Bridgewater, please bring some data. The parents who are going to get addicted, think of how the children are going to deal with all of this in school. The children who are going to get addicted, what are they going to do in life? We came to Bridgewater because it was a humble, sweet town 8 years ago. I don't want to live here if you're going to create this venomous thing open to everyone. please stop once and for all.
Good evening, councilors. Ed Ivaldi, Boxwood Lane. Back in 2016, the town of Bridgewater voted against the legalization of marijuana. Since that time, our town leadership instituted a ban on retail sale of marijuana through various bylaws. Yet despite this, a minority group of councilors have continued to use any means possible to overturn the will of the voters and jeopardize the health and well-being of our young people. I'd like to offer a few comments on the proposed order number 2312 presented tonight by Councilors Wood and Chase. The first clause in the order mentions the non-binding vote that was held back in April of 2021 and states that the town of Bridgewater supports allowing retail sales of recreational marijuana. Unfortunately, that is a very misleading, if not false statement, as the results of that vote indicated that only 1,079 people voted yes in that non-binding referendum. That represents only 6% of the registered voters in our town and is therefore a statistically insignificant number. The second clause mentions that additional tax dollars would be taken in. While that may be a true statement, it's also misleading and there is no mention of any additional costs. These costs are related to healthcare, substance abuse counseling, and public safety, to name a few. Over the past several years, numerous studies have been sent to this board showing the negative impacts that recreational marijuana is having on the communities around the country. Yet these studies are for some reason ignored and never discussed by this board. Why is that? If the order is going to mention potential revenues, then it also must mention costs. I propose the following be added. Whereas retail sales of marijuana would increase youth addiction, suicide, and overdose rates, as well as increase costs in the areas of healthcare, substance abuse counseling, and public safety. The third clause, which cites MGL 94G Section 3, is a portion of legislation that has created much confusion across the state, and because of its conflicts with other parts of the statute, has resulted in court cases costing municipalities huge increases in legal fees. As a result, caution should be taken as this potential lawsuits could result in Bridgewater. The order is titled, "Let the Voters Decide." Isn't that what happened in 2016? So what has changed since 2016? What we do know is that since recreational marijuana has been legalized, there has been a proliferation of retail pot shops around us, resulting in increased supply and use by both legal and non-legal age groups. Addiction and suicide rates have steadily increased, and the retail sale of all associated marijuana products have contributed to the nation's worst overdose epidemic in our history, having lost over 100,000 lives to illicit drugs in last year in 2021. Bridgewater's vision for the future should be a world in which children and families thrive and substance abuse is prevented so as not to destroy the lives of future generations. The people spoke back in 2016. We don't need to speak again. I urge you to oppose this order tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street, Bridgewater. I agree with everything that's been said so far, so I can't say it as eloquently as the previous speakers. But my questions are, besides the fact I implore you not to pursue this, some of the arguments have been, well, all the other towns have it, why shouldn't we? If everybody jumps, remember your mom said, if everybody jumps off a cliff, do you have to join them? We don't have to join them. There's no hardship. If anybody wants the stuff, they can go to a town next door. The tax dollars should not be the reason why we allow something like this in our town. The questions I have on this, the question that wants to be presented is not very clear to the voters. It needs to be if, and hopefully not, but if it is going to be put on a ballot, whenever that may be, it needs to be written a lot clearer. You can't just say, do you want to allow medical, retail in, just have the medical marijuana places be allowed? My question, reading the Mass General Law, if we allow just the 2 medical marijuana facilities to be retail, hopefully not, but allow them, does that open it up for the rest of town? Is that going to limit us to just the 2? Is that going to allow us to say, okay, now that we allow it in Bridgewater, are other places, are other people going to start applying? Are we going to limit it? Are we legally able to limit it to just those two? Don't get me wrong, I don't want it at all. But if it was to be, are we legally able to limit it to just those two in that area? What is the control mechanism so that we can't have it anywhere else in town and it would be limited to just those two? I don't see that in the Mass General Law. There's a lot of confusion in that Mass General Law. And if the question is presented the way it's presented in this ordinance, no one's going to know what the heck you're talking about. It just, that Mass General Law thing is very confusing. You need to be more specific language, easier language to read so people understand. And you need to be able to have time to educate people as to what this actually means. As everyone else said, you know, the dollar is not going to, the tax dollars from this is not going to save this town. And you got to realize that this town, I've been here 43 years and it has changed. And just because we have a city government doesn't mean we have to become a city. People came here for a reason. It wasn't to have all the stuff that everybody wants to be in. We got high-rise buildings and all this building. And now you want retail as if it's going to be the mighty tax dollar savings to this town. And it's not. It's going to cost us. And I just implore that this gets stopped. Thank you.
It's Jennifer Smith, Boxwood Lane. I'm here tonight to oppose the ordinance O proposed by Bill Wood and Fred Chase. This ordinance proposed is not in the best interest of Bridgewater citizens and their families, especially the youth. There has been countless data showing dramatic increases in youth use, rising rates of marijuana impaired driving, and the harms pot can have on health. Please don't use the phrase, "it would bring tax dollars to Bridgewater." Many towns, all with the same issues, outright ban this addiction for profit business. Some just around us, East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, Rainham, Easton, they all have bans. I believe Stoughton as well. I know Brockton allows it and Taunton, but there are bans everywhere around us. Residents, don't believe for 1 minute your taxes will go down or you will be getting a check in your mailbox, or perhaps your sidewalk will be fixed. Residents need to ask themselves, when was the last time promised tax dollars helped your family? What about the reduction in the residents' quality of life? The increased smell of marijuana, increased traffic near 104 if it wasn't already bad enough, or the increase in impaired driving, increased crime, or the increased usage among the youth. Doesn't that matter? These are just some of the consequences the residents of Bridgewater would experience, while the multi-millionaire pot owners pad their pockets because a certain few decided to lobby for them. It would be nice if the same people that keep bringing up this ordinance could spend more time on important things, like maybe safe drinking water, for starters, or working on cleaning up the downtown, or repairing the fence in the common, things like that. I ask the other councilors to please reject this ordinance. Thank you for listening.
Hello, Pat Neary, Lakeside Drive. I have a couple of comments tonight. First, I want to say I really approve of the fact that you will probably approve a resolution for Indigenous Peoples' Day. I think that's a great idea. Second, I see that you are also talking about voting on the recodification of our zoning laws tonight. And I was hoping and expecting that we were going to have another workshop. We've had many workshops that were canceled or even rushed through with the format of, we're going to tell you what this new zoning regulation is compared to the last one. We're on number 15 now, so we'll compare it to 14. Well, that's not the way it should be. It should be from the original zoning that exists now and how you want to change it now so that we can compare them and see what's actually being changed. So I wish you would reconsider a vote on that tonight and have a workshop, as I have asked several times. The third and most important is that I really am opposed to this ballot question coming up. But it's also very nice of you to have us all here again. We haven't been together for a while. I am here to let you know that even though you may not be aware of it, states that have legalized marijuana have found so many of their young people that enjoy pot have ruined their lives. Those of us that oppose pot shops in town follow the statistics, and they are not good. Addiction, suicide, and overdose rates are climbing, and that is due to the normalization of this drug by the facilities and big businesses that profit from it. It isn't your grandpa's THC anymore. Once again, as we have requested for years, please do not encourage the sale and use of this drug in our town. Please don't put dollars before the health and the future of our young people. And I thank you for listening.
Good evening, counselors. My name is Fred Kern, 77 South Street. And I serve as a pediatrician here in Bridgewater, and I represent a group of 10 medical providers, physicians, and nurse practitioners. We also have 3 full-time behavioral health clinicians in our practice. And I'm here to speak for the young people in our community and the future of our community. I can tell you from my experiences talking with youth all day long as a pediatrician that marijuana is not good for the young people. As has been said, it's not your grandfather's marijuana. The percentage of THC in these marijuana products are astronomical. And we are seeing and hearing about and reading about almost every day cases of emergency room admissions for THC-induced psychosis and the so-called THC hyperemesis syndrome, where people overdose on marijuana products and end up in the emergency room and needing admission for rehydration. So as part of our group work, we're part of Children's Hospital Doctors Group. We had the substance abuse lead at the clinic there with us this past week in Bridgewater, and they reported that there are now 80 kids that are now awaiting treatment to get into the adolescent substance abuse clinic at Children's Hospital. 80 children that are on a waiting list. They're so busy, they cannot take all the kids that are presenting with marijuana addiction. So I'm just reporting to you from the trenches. I interact with our youth all day long, and I can tell you that from my experience, marijuana is not a good thing for young people. And I would humbly urge you to look at this issue through the eyes of our young people and through the eyes of the future of our community, which is the young people. Please do everything in your power to not put this back on the ballot. The people of Bridgewater have spoken soundly with wisdom, and I urge you to please look at the issue through the eyes of our young people. Thank you very much.
Good evening. In full transparency, my name is Josh Cabral. I'm not actually a resident here in town, but I am a lifelong Bridgewater resident. So before I wanted to just
Sorry, we can only ask the residents.
completely understand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Citizen comment?
Could he just ask for permission to speak and ask if you folks would vote to listen to him?
I would venture to say it's a precedent that we don't want to accept. It's been fairly upheld in the past.
Just for the town council? I mean, because I know at hearings, that's the procedure. They ask permission, and then the council decides whether they want to hear them or not.
In my estimation, I think that it's worthwhile.
Mr. President, if I could, doesn't the charter allow for us to take a vote?
It does indeed, Counselor, and is there a motion?
Well, I think that I'd certainly make a motion to allow them to speak, and then if it fails, at least we've allowed them the opportunity to get a vote.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second.
Point of information.
Yes. Go ahead.
Can I ask what the subject is that the speaker is going to speak about? Usually when we take this vote, we know that they represent something or someone.
I'm the executive director of the Well in Bridgewater. I run an agency. We work on Pleasant Street in Bridgewater and Main Street. And we do counseling services in the town.
All right.
Thank you.
We have a motion in a second. Could we have a roll call vote?
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. George,
No.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
No.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
No.
Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
It's 5-3. Motion passes.
We're ready, miss.
Thank you, and sorry for the disorganization. I just came on behalf of some of the family and town members that I work with, and basically just asked to talk about what I've observed over the course of in treatment with these families. I'll abstain from telling you how to use this information, but essentially what we have seen is an increase in chemical dependence, cannabis-based, in treatment. And I want to talk specifically about 2 points, how this affects, because most people have already talked about kind of the other harms and things like that. But what I have found anecdotally is the 2 points that it's actually impacted most is diagnostic certainty. So because of the addition of the substance abuse disorder, it makes it really hard to diagnose and masks other disorders like personality disorders, anxiety disorders, depression. And so it makes it very, very hard to sort of establish a treatment plan if you can't get diagnostic certainty. The second point is because of the prevalence of marijuana use in cannabis-based services in order to sort of self-medicate, it's made it really sort of blaringly obvious that kids are not developing tools and strategies to actually clinically deal with their anxiety and depression. And so what we have over the course of time is the law of diminishing return with drugs is essentially making it so that these kids are building up a tolerance, but when they reach adulthood, they have very, very little strategies and clinical tools to actually manage their mental illness by the time they move into adulthood. And so those are the complications that I've witnessed in my practice. Again, I'll leave you guys to do as a town what you decide with that information, but I did want to make it known. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further citizen comment? Yes.
Aisha Hussain, 40 Sophia Lane. I just wanted to ask if it is possible for you guys to contact the police department and take their input in it. How is it going to help them? Or how is it going to hinder in their services? Just because it's a part of town and it's a major part of our security and safety as well so they can perhaps shed more light on the harms that marijuana and weed causes. So that may help you guys as well to not put the question on the ballot. Again, opposing anything to do with marijuana in Bridgewater. Thank you.
Further citizen comment? I have received some email written in from citizens, and there are 3 that I have provided to the council members, and I'd like to read into the record. First, it's a message from Mr. Holman of Plymouth Street. He writes, "Good afternoon. Unfortunately, I cannot attend tonight's meeting as I'm in Pleasant Street. I want to write to let you know I am in favor of the order at 123-012. The last non-binding vote in town showed a positive town response for the limits of retail marijuana in Bridgewater. On the next round, we should allow the people of Bridgewater to vote once again to make the measure binding." This, by the way, will receive a link of the board of our town. John Day. Sides at Big Shore Drive. Good morning, Governor. Governor, I would appreciate it if you please forward this email supporting order at 123-0 called all members of the town council. I'm a longtime resident of Bridgewater, as well as a member of the board of directors of the Following Area Chamber of Commerce and the SCORE volunteer / certified business council. I regularly interact with small business owners and creating jobs and paying taxes. The business owners decide to locate their home. Supporting the campus business community and benefit not only from taxes they pay, but also locating their business. I toured a number of these establishments and participated in ribbon cutting ceremonies and dispensaries. I can say that I witnessed that all are essential community are focused on providing quality products and services / products that are helping others. There seems to be a high demand for these services and products that there are both medicinal and recreational uses for, which are only legal in the state. I strongly support allowing the sale of medicinal and recreational marijuana / cannabis products in the town of Bridgewater. If we do not allow the these businesses in our community, and other communities will continue to have performance. And finally, from High Street. Very simply, I support consumer marijuana sales, but believe it should not be limited to existing medical marijuana facilities. I just wanted to read those to the record. Those are the only comments that I have received either directly. This is a comment received no direct communication. I did receive these through our town council clerk, and this afternoon at 4 o'clock. That is all that I heard since the time was posted to our
it wasn't one received by us.
If I heard
all of us.
Okay.
That was not in support of it. It's not in support of it. So.
Hearings, we do have we have one appointment to consider this evening. Appointments Michael Sodi, Space Committee. It appears that for appointment met all the appropriate qualifications. Now, I appreciate motion for approval.
Second.
We have motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood
Yes.
and Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
That's 8 in favor, 0 opposed.
I think there are still issues with hearing us. And we're speaking.
Hearings for us this evening. License transaction first. 2023-001. Granted transfer of a class 2 used license. Fritz Auto Body 567 Main Street. And note for the advertised in the enterprise channel website and contacted. Once again, this is Chris Auto Body 567 Main Street, Class 2 auto license. license is currently issued in the name of Bridgewater Auto Group. Transfer Fritz Quality Auto. Is the present? Yes, it's across the street from my house. That's fine, thanks. So, firstly, are there questions from the general public? It's 7:43, and we will open the public hearing on this matter. And are there questions at this time from members of the general public? Is there anyone here from the general public to speak in favor of this transfer request? Does any member of the public wish to speak in opposition? Questions from the town councilors? Close the hearing. It is 7:44. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
And very discussion.
Mr. Souza, oh, sorry. Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
And Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
It's 7 in favor, 0 opposed.
Our second hearing this evening is 004, granting of a transfer of a Class 2 youth auto use license on 1893 Plymouth Street. This hearing has been advertised and on the website. Others have notified. Here, and time is 7:45. I open the public hearing on the matter of petition 2023-004, granting of a Class 2 youth auto sales license to Auto Nation at 1893 Old Plymouth Street. And I record that license is currently issued in the name of Social Auto Detailing and Window Tinting. Transferred to Auto Nation, which is a partnership. Are there any questions from the general public? Any member of the public here to speak in favor of this? Any member of the public here to speak in opposition? And other questions from the town council? A motion for approval. So moved. Second. Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we could have a roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Oops. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
And Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
We have no presentation scheduled this evening. We will move to the town manager's report. Comment is an update on the Mitchell's building.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I have fortunately, very little to report on the Mitchell School this evening. The school did open on opening day. It did open under a temporary certificate of occupancy, and the work on punch list items will continue in evenings and on weekends until the work is complete. No work is planned during the school day. The open house was very well attended. Ribbon cutting was well attended. The budget, for those interested in the budget, is also going very well. The project is on track to spend less than the revised budget of $67,107,000 And the bottom line is, no matter how you dice it, it will be less, about $14 million less than voters actually approved when that project started. So that is all good news, but happy to answer any questions.
Move on to the farmers market at Riverland.
Thank you. A gentleman by the name of Al Lacerda, who has started a Veterans Foundation, Fire for Effect Foundation, had requested the use of Town River Landing for a farmers market to benefit veterans causes. And that was approved, and he is planning 2 dates. One is October 8th and the other is October 22nd from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Right now, he is looking for any vendors that would like to sign up and attend. And you can go to Facebook and search Fire for Effect Foundation and find a vendor contact information for potential vendors. I can also tell you that he has taken the bull by the horns and is organizing a Town River cleanup to prep for those October events. And the Town River cleanup will be on Sunday, September 19th. And if anybody wants to show up there on Sunday or get more information about that, including the times, they can also reach out to the Facebook page for Fire for Effect Foundation. He is designing all this work as community events and as a way to shed some light on veterans issues and also to benefit the town and local businesses generally. So I encourage anybody interested both on Sunday, September 19th to do some cleanup work down at Town River Landing, and then also the actual farmers markets on October 8th and October 22nd from 1 to 6 p.m. And happy to answer questions about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Councilor Moore.
Maybe just a comment. I just wanted to show my appreciation for this. I think things in town tend to get done by people stepping up and doing them. And this is a great example, I think, of someone pushing an idea forward. And just a question. I know there's a date for this. Is it a single event, or is the idea that this is a recurring monthly or quarterly?
I think he would like to see this be a recurring event on a maybe twice monthly basis next year, but I think he's just trying it out on these October 8th and October 22nd dates just to get a sense of whether or not it'll really fly. And I think there's a big pent up demand for farmers markets, particularly. So I'm hopeful that people really show up and both vendors and customers.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments on that subject? Update on hybrid meetings.
Thank you. I know several counselors have asked about hybrid meetings, and I know many members of the public have asked about hybrid meetings. As you obviously know, the council came back to in-person meetings. At least I hope everybody knows that. And we have tried to provide sort of a hybrid, Councilor Rushton tonight participating via virtual world. Our issues doing this on a routine basis and letting everybody join either in person or hybrid really revolve around staffing hybrid meetings, which is significantly different than staffing all virtual meetings or all in-person meetings. So the hybrid model really requires dedicated staff, which leads me to tonight's unfortunate issues. So we have an equipment malfunction. So I apologize to the council for you not being able to actually see Councilor Rushton. I'm told that everybody else on cable TV and Facebook can actually see Councilor Rushton and you, but you can't see them here tonight. But we also don't have John Luck, our usually very reliable BTV staffer to run the back end of the meeting. But back to hybrid meetings, the law has been changed a couple of times. The emergency provisions that Governor Baker implemented were supported by the legislature on a temporary basis, and then extended on a temporary basis to March 31st, 2023. So technically, our ability to even have a hybrid meeting, or for that matter, an all virtual meeting, would expire on March 31st of next year. So we know we don't want to spend any significant money that we currently haven't budgeted on a hybrid setup really until the legislature makes up its mind and adopts something permanent, so that we know that we have potentially a hybrid option as a permanent option. That any changes to open meeting law that would allow that likely would not be filed until January. The legislature wrapped up its 2-year legislative session end of July, and it's unlikely that anything really will be filed until the new legislature takes its seat in January, best case. So that's sort of where we sit. We are hoping, quite frankly, that the hybrid option is a permanent option, because I think we've seen throughout the past 2 years that there's an incredible amount of public participation that we haven't seen in recent years before that. And we would like to maintain and encourage that public participation. And I think any opportunity that you can give people to join meetings in a hybrid setting is extremely useful. So we are very much in favor of that. We're just stepping through it on a very rational and unfortunately slow way. We did a little research just so for comparison purposes. And most of our surrounding towns are holding in-person meetings. 2, I'm told Brockton and Wareham are virtual only, and 2, Plymouth and Marshfield are using hybrid. Those 2 hybrid towns are using the webinar version of Zoom, which is a much simpler way to manage meetings. It doesn't require quite the staffing that a full hybrid model would. We are getting our webinar version back. We're going to reactivate that subscription just to begin testing whether or not we can really make that work effectively in the meantime. So that's really what I had on hybrid meetings, but it's a bit of a confusing subject, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the town? Yes, Councilor Moore.
I think a little bit of a statement question. I think it's critical that we figure out a way to support hybrid meetings or remote meetings. And the reason I say that is I think even looking at this room, for someone to come and share their perspective with us, first, they have to be comfortable standing alone in front of a bunch of people. They have to be able to drive here. They have to be able to get to the second floor. They have to potentially get time off. So with every obstacle we put to participation, we push more and more people away from participation. And so I know this is known to everybody, and we're doing the best we can. But I think, in terms of just priorities, I think this is one of the big ones for us, especially when we talk about things like getting more participation and people showing up at the polls. They show up when they feel part of it. And if we force them to come here at night, fewer will feel part of it. So I guess my question then at the end of that is, you mentioned that some other towns have tried fully virtual. And could you talk a little bit about, why that option isn't something that works for us right now?
Fully virtual would certainly work for you. You've done that for 2 years up until recently when we came back. And that's always an option, and that the governor the legislature has extended that option again until that's one of the emergency provisions that the governor's extended to March 31st. So that is an option. I think I'm not putting words in counselors' mouths, but I think the council was desirous of getting back to in-person meetings. But that is an option.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor George.
So this is just a general statement. And I do understand the draw for virtual, allowing participation, virtually, things of that nature. I think until the technology is really solidified, we do run into the potential issue that if the expectation is set that the public and counselors, can participate virtually, and that technology is not available, it could actually disrupt an entire meeting to the point where we couldn't have it. I know over the years, people have had issues with getting here at time and things of that nature, which I totally understand, but I would not feel comfortable relying on the technology that we've seen over the course of the last couple of years is far from perfect. And if we get to that point where the technology is constantly challenging us, we're not going to get anything done to the point where it could really restrain us. So understanding the draw for it, but I would be of the mindset until someone could really tell me that we've staffed it properly and the technology is reliable, I would say to 90%. Unfortunately, I would not support that. Just thank you.
And to piggyback on the technology issue, who is responsible for the technology? The technological responsibility of having a public meeting that allows remote participation. When cable access was established in the 1980s, it was pretty much because of what Councilman Moore said, people to participate, to see it. Government was hiding, and we couldn't see anything. Now that we have cable access and we're paying a fee in our bill for that, they have a channel that broadcasts a lot of public meetings, particularly council meetings or selected meetings in the community. So is that still happening? I mean, is cable access still taping it and showing it at 9 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon, or whatever? It's still doing that. And now you have the Zoom and the other technological responsibility for communities. I mean, whose responsibility is it? We just had a budget and finance meeting prior to this meeting. Is it the responsibility of the budget and finance committee, if we have to do a remote meeting, to make sure that the meeting is offered remotely? I mean, then we have to cancel the meeting. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You have to go in this direction. I mean, we cancel meetings because we can't see their council Washington. At what point?
That's a great question, and it's one that doesn't have an easy answer. So the simple answer to one part of that is yes, cable access does still broadcast. You should be being broadcast live right now, as far as I know. That is the case. You're also being broadcast live on Facebook, but that isn't public access TV's responsibility. So over the last 2 years, or during the pandemic, when Zoom went from something nobody ever heard of to being just the regular sort of platform that people use, the legislature and the governor allowed us to use that, well, Zoom and many other platforms, but mostly Zoom, I think, for most public meetings. But I don't think there was ever any thought put into, okay, who really controls this technology, who's responsible for this technology. And I suspect that's some of the conversation that the legislature, the hard conversation that the legislature will have next year. There are efforts, cable, I think as most counselors know, cable access is funded by a small 5% charge on your cable bill, which we negotiate. It's not much of a negotiation anymore, but we have a long-term contract that supports that. That only supports your cable television, which includes your 3 public access channels. There is no revenue stream coming from the internet portion of your Comcast bill. So that as people cut the cord, which is happening with some frequency now, and move to all internet, all streaming, there is no revenue stream for public access television. So if you ask Jeff Fowler, who's the director of Bridgewater Public Access, what will public access look like in 10 years? it won't be there. It won't be there in the same way, so I think the long answer to your question is that I think that's the legislature really has to sit down and look at technology and figure out, okay, whose responsibility really is it to broadcast public meetings? And there was, as part of, I think, the House proposal several months ago, towards the end of the session, part of their proposal was to require streaming of public meetings, and that met with huge resistance, mostly because of the expense to smaller communities. So that didn't make it through the legislative process. But that's now a discussion that we kind of know is going to come up in the next session. So I think to Councillor Gallagher's point and Councillor Moore's point, I think one of the things that the council can do very effectively is voice an opinion about, what the council wants to see in terms of remote access, hybrid access, streaming. So it's probably worth an agenda item to have that conversation and just see if there's some consensus about what this council can ask the legislature to do, because I'm sure everybody will be lobbying for a whole host of different things, but that's probably something that we could take up in November.
Are there further questions for Lieutenant? Launch you on item D, schedule of High Street closure.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is something I just wanted to make sure that I could get out into the public realm. We've been working for probably 6 years on replacing the High Street Bridge. And the High Street Bridge, for those that don't know, is the crossing where Wall Street intersects, where the entrance to our roadways department is, down there, where it crosses the town river. As part of that, the dam is scheduled to be removed. In fact, the reason to replace the bridge is the fact that the dam is being removed. So I wanted to be completely transparent about the challenges there. The replacement of the High Street Bridge is going to necessitate a closure of High Street for a period potentially up to 10 months. And I realize that that's going to be a huge impact to residents and commuters that use High Street. It's obviously a very well-traveled road, but unfortunately, there's no other way to do the project without closing down that bridge. And just as an aside, because you're working in the water, there are time of year restrictions that we have to abide by. So beginning March 15th through July 14th, we can't be in the water. And there's another window that I'm not going to give you the date of because I don't recall it. But it is possible that this could happen as soon as middle of November. There's also a possibility that it won't happen until July. So part of the timing is going to depend on the general contractor that's selected through the bid process, which is about to begin right now. Contractor determines the schedule and then lets us, we obviously will have a lot of conversation about that. But whether that happens in November or whether that happens later in the middle of 2023, I just don't know yet. Obviously, I want to let, the reason for me mentioning it is to just get it out into the public so that people know that the bridge will be closed at some point. As soon as we know the very specific schedule, obviously we will do an enormous amount of outreach, obviously to the neighborhood and the whole town, because the whole town generally uses that as artery. And then as an aside, we're having the Division of Ecological Restoration come and give you a whole overview and history of the dam removal project and then the associated bridge replacement, so that you have a much better idea of really what's going to happen there. So unfortunately, I don't normally wouldn't even present this without having specific dates, but I think it's important for people at least have it in the back of their mind that they know that something's going to happen there, and that street will be closed for some period of time. So happy to answer questions on that.
And Councilor Guy.
Just the whole High Street's not going to be closed. It's the portion.
Absolutely. Just
From what point to what point, I guess.
just the bridge portion. So you will have access to Wall Street where it intersects with High Street. You'll have access to the clubs, two different clubs, coming in two different directions. But yeah, the only piece that will be closed is the bridge itself. Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Councilor Moore.
Through you to the town manager, I guess, as part of planning the closing, do we look at the routes that people will now take to get through that? And do we have anything to prepare those neighborhoods for more traffic?
Absolutely. That's part of our overall outreach. And we'll be making sure that we have community meetings with those neighborhoods to the extent they're neighborhoods, and just let people know what the timing is and so forth. Oh, sorry, went out of my head.
Thank you. Other further questions? Yes, Councilor Perry.
Thank you. Just on that thought, one of the areas that people certainly might travel is Oak Street to get around that. And obviously with the state of the bridge there, the one way, what is the latest situation on that? And how will that potentially be a factor when this project goes through?
Good question. Oak Street, the funding to repair Oak Street, we have a design plan ready to go, and funding has been our difficulty. The state has had several bridge programs that provide grant funding for bridge replacements or bridge reconstructions. Unfortunately, our bridge doesn't meet the criteria. You know, as you recall, there was essentially a glorified culvert replacement program for spans. I think it was less than 30 feet. I don't recall exactly, but the Oak Street Bridge just didn't fit into any of these grant funding opportunities. Now we're looking at a federal opportunity. There's obviously infrastructure money flowing through the federal and state DOTs. And so we are looking at a potential direct to replace the deck, not replace the bridge, but replace the deck through federal funding. So back in 2016, I believe it was, the estimated cost to do the work was just shy of $1 million. My guess is that's closer to, well, it's probably well over $2 million at this point. So that's where we're looking right now to try to repair that bridge. Likely that we won't repair that bridge in time for the, very positive we won't repair that bridge in time for the High Street closure. So that will be a pressure point, and we'll have to improve the approaches and be very clear about stops and goes on Oak Street.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor.
Point of clarification, Oak Street Bridge is two ways.
Used to be a two-way bridge.
But it's one lane.
It's one way now?
Yeah, one lane.
Oh, one lane, I thought you said one way.
Yeah, no, one lane.
My fault, okay. Because if you said one way, I would break it off.
Further questions? Seeing none. We move to discussions. We have a discussion scheduled this evening on water management update. So, Mr. Dunn, would you care to introduce that?
I would love to introduce that and just sort of shape some of your conversation. Jonas Kozlauskas is here. He's the water sewer superintendent. So if there are any questions that you have for him or anything I can't answer, he'll be a good resource, I hope. So I think just in term, obviously water has been in the news a lot this summer for a whole host of reasons. And just to sort of narrow that focus, there are three issues that we have in Bridgewater that literally every other town in our part of the state, every other town in the state has as well. One is our withdrawal permit. What are we allowed to withdraw from the ground on a daily basis? And how can we increase that, or whether we can increase that permitted withdrawal? Water supply due to the drought. Obviously, everybody's been contending with that. And then finally, the third thing is PFAS. So I think everybody has heard PFAS issues, and we've reported out, as we're required to do any and every time we get a hit over and above the state's threshold there. So on the withdrawal permit, we are permitted for a withdrawal of 1.89 million gallons per day out of our 10 active wells. And I think, as I've said before, all our wells have been active, very active this summer. We push up above 1.6 million in reality, in actuality. So we are pushing up against our permitted supply. Because of the drought conditions, demand has been significantly higher over this past summer, and that has caused some of our 10 wells to be less productive than they normally would be. So our long-term objective is to increase the permitted withdrawal under our DEP permit. That's not easy to do. That's a time-consuming process, but that's something that we hope to undertake. We're beginning to undertake, and we will hopefully get to a successful conclusion there. So the second issue, water supply due to drought. We did issue the outdoor watering ban, as you all know, in July. That did help levels in the water towers recover. So that is the good news. We actually were notified today that DEP has lowered our drought level to level 2 in our region, which is significant drought. It was level 3 critical drought. So that is an improvement. And we have seen locally some improvement to the supply, potentially because of some of the rains that we've had, but certainly the reduction in use. So on the water supply issue, I can tell you we have 3 wells that were permitted and have been approved by DEP, and at the time tested. Those are ready to use. They need treatment, but they are potentially able to bring in a little less than 500,000 gallons per day into the system. Those would need to be tied into one or both of the treatment plants, or have an independent and separate treatment plant specific to those 3 wells. So engineering is underway to look at how to get that done. My hope is to tie those into potentially Carver's treatment plant, but that's just my hope. So while those 3 wells don't increase our withdrawal permit, they do allow us to provide an alternate supply of water for the system, so that we can actually rest on a rotating basis the other 10 wells, so that they can get some recharge that they haven't been able to have for a while. So I don't have a timeline yet on how that would look. That's very highly dependent upon DEP's permitting process for that, and their and also the engineering, the results of the engineering work that's being done right now. So that is water supply due to the drought. PFAS. I actually had the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to speak to several community groups on PFAS, and I know there is a huge amount of misconception out there about PFAS. So PFAS, I can tell you, is not just a Bridgewater issue. It's not just a Southeast Massachusetts issue. It is, in fact, a worldwide issue. And the amounts of PFAS that we are dealing with in our water are very relatively small compared to other, even other towns in our area, but certainly other areas of the state and the nation. And I can give you a little context there in a minute. Some of the things that really are important to remember now, and I'm certainly not saying that PFAS is good for you, because clearly it's not good for you, but there's a lot of research going on right now to really determine how dangerous PFAS really is. And that so far is not completely conclusive. So there are a few things I think it's important to remember, and I'll just sort of tick them off. What are PFAS? For those that don't know, PFAS or PFAS 6, which represents the 6 most important chemicals, have been around since the 1930s and the 1940s. They're a family of chemicals used to manufacture thousands of products that we use every day, including carpeting right here, clothing that we're wearing, fabrics, furniture, paper products for food packaging. Non-stick cookware is the one that most people think of when they think of PFAS. Massachusetts has set a parts per trillion of 20. And in order to put that in some kind of context, I looked up several different ways to put it in context. So 20 parts per trillion is the equivalent of 20 drops in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. It's also the equivalent, if you translate it into time, it's the equivalent of 1 second every 32,000 years. So that's the level of testing that has to be precise in order to determine whether or not you've got 20 parts per trillion. So Massachusetts is 20 parts per trillion. EPA has set a suggested threshold at 70 parts per trillion. I can tell you most bottled water, people think, oh, you can go out and just get bottled water to drink and you'll be fine. Most bottled water contains some level of PFAS. Some contain an alarming amount of PFAS. So you can go on to our website and see a link to that one right there. Actually, I think that one's good, but you can go on to our website and you can see a link for DEP's listing of safe bottled waters. And so if anybody's curious there, you can easily get a link to safe bottled waters through our website and through DEP's website. Actually DEP's website and ours, we've reprinted it, but we do have links to a lot more PFAS information, frequently asked questions, and so forth. Another, just putting it in context, there is very likely nothing different about the water that you're drinking today in Bridgewater than there was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So very likely that the levels of PFAS that we are consuming, and we're all consuming PFAS in some form or fashion, very likely that it's not any not significantly different than it was decades ago. And again, only to stress that this is not a bridge. In fact, Bridgewater is very lucky because given what has happened over the years in Bridgewater and the manufacturing that's gone on and so forth, not so much anymore. But we are very lucky that our hits are so limited. But let me, just in terms of states, only about well, actually 29 states have not set any limit yet, but I'll run through a few state limits here. Connecticut is, and keep in mind, we are 20 parts per trillion. Connecticut's at 70 parts per trillion. Vermont and Maine are similar to Massachusetts at 20 parts per trillion. Maryland is 140 parts per trillion. California, surprisingly, is 500 parts per trillion. And on the high side, Colorado is 400,000 parts per trillion for certain PFAS chemicals. And as of late March of 2022, Florida and Rhode Island had not even set. They were among the 29 states that had not set any limit at all. So that has been instructive. So obviously, we know that we're going to have an issue in terms of filtering PFAS out of our system, the small amounts that we actually do have. And we have our engineering firm working on that as well, and looking for filtration, permanent filtration solutions there. I will say that we are installing one centralized filtration system so that people that have a concern about PFAS will be able to go and get PFAS-free filtered water that is coming right out of our system. And that will be set up down at the highway barn. It'll be open 24/7 for people that need to fill up with drinking water or fill up with PFAS-free water. We are just at this point, and Jonas can correct me if I'm wrong, we're waiting only for DEP's approval of that installation. Otherwise, it is ready to go. So we are hoping, we can't predict when DEP will give that, but we are hoping that within the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to turn the spigot on and allow people to fill up. Generally, I think, permanent filtration is going to be an expensive solution. And since our levels are relatively low, it's unlikely that we'll be first in line for any grant funding through DEP. They do have several grant opportunities for preliminary studies and temporary solutions, such as the ones that we've already initiated. But chances are that since our other state neighbors will be looking at that have much higher concentrations of PFAS, will probably be stepping in front of us for federal and state grant funding. So regardless, we'd look every day at sources of funding, and if there is funding out there, we'll get it. So that I went on way too long, but I just wanted to sort of set some of those issues.
Thank you. I was actually the one that asked for the item on the agenda, not because of the PFAS issue, although it's critically important, but more a question about supply. So this week or last week, BSU added 3,000 bodies to the Bridgewater water system. And we've had a lot of expansion in town to the point where our DPW director, Azu, sent a note to the council that basically said, we are pushing the seams and that we can't have any more expansion based on that. I know there's been work done on Vernon Street for exploration and some other things, but I also know that there's a limit to how much water the pipes can move, right? So I was hoping to hear how the supply will be improved going forward, not just how it's going to be treated, but how the supply is going to be improved, and how we handle suddenly 3,000 extra bodies on the system and other housing and that sort of thing. And because there may be some point where the council needs to take some action related to infrastructure and or housing.
So I'll address some of that, and then I'll ask Jonas to sort of address the other part. So I think our first step in terms of improving supply is unrelated to the actual amount of water that's in the ground. It's permitting, increasing the withdrawal permit to allow us to go over 1.89 million. And so that's really the first step. It's probably the longest step, but that's probably the first step in improving the supply. And you hit on it. Those 3 wells on Vernon Street are those are the 3 wells that can supply us, almost 500,000 gallons. We could not use the million. We couldn't have 1.6 million and then also have another 500,000 gallons and use all that under our current permit. So we have the water, we have the ability to tap into the water, and we are beginning the process to do that. But really the constant step, and we will do that regardless of whether or not DEP allows us an increase in our withdrawal permit. But that, that additional 500,000 gallons will allow the wells to rest, and that's critical for the health of the system. In terms of the specifics about how many gallons we can move through the pipes, and the 3,000 additional, sort of users, that one I will defer to Jonas, because those are the hard questions.
Well, currently, right now, we're withdrawing about 1.6, 1.7 million out of the ground daily. It is putting a strain on our towers. We tried starting the flushing program up in September. We went out one day and the towers dropped almost 12 feet, one tower. It took, the next day, we figured it was gonna rejuvenate itself. It only came up 3 feet. So what I made decisions is to, let's wait another month. Maybe the usage from the outdoor usage would go down and we could do the flushing program. But it looks like we're gonna do an abbreviated flushing program to begin with this fall and another abbreviated flushing program in the spring to try to get the pipes flushed out and to deal with the water quality issues that we're having. As far as, like Mr. Dutton says, it's not a matter of how many wells you have. It's a matter of how much the DP is gonna allow you to withdraw. And in talking with them, it's a tough process because they ratcheted down everybody on their new permit. We used to have a 2.4 million gallons a day, and they ratcheted us all the way down to 1.89 across. Everybody get ratcheted down. So that will be a tough hurdle for us. And especially now with the drought conditions going on, it's like, I don't think they're even, they'll tell us the process, but it'll be a tough process to overcome.
Through you to the superintendent, thank you very much for coming.
Yep.
So, and Mr. Dutton will agree, I oversimplify complex things. In regards to the PFAS.
Yep.
When you do the testing,
Mhm.
you test an individual well, correct? For each individual. well.
Correct.
So if there's a higher than acceptable level in one well,
Correct.
it potentially could be mitigated by other wells if,
That's what's called blending.
okay. So in essence, and I'm trying to put this out there for the public consumption because it is very concerning. We are required to send out the notification.
Yeah, when it's over the limit.
Right, but I also want people to understand that we have not, nor hopefully will we ever have to put out a boil order. It's more making the public aware that a well was tested and it was above acceptable limits.
Correct.
Okay, and I think that's.
And it's basically, but the problem there lies in when you go to blend from a well that's, producing more PFAS, you got to ratchet down that well. Basically, we have one well that's probably half the flow right now.
Okay.
Okay. And then we're blending with 2 other wells, which takes the limit under the 20.
Right.
Well, the problem here now is we're having trouble with another well because it's been running for 3 months. I had to have a company come in and now they're rehabbing that well. So there's a lot of play, there's a lot of moving parts here.
Right, and I'm more just focusing on one thing, but obviously
Yeah.
it's much more parts to it. And I think we all hear when the notification goes out that people become extremely concerned, rightfully so.
Mhm.
But there are other factors to take into consideration around that as well.
Mhm.
The second question I have is this, I don't know the answer to this. It just came up in conversation. So we do have a good number of private well owners, private well permits in Bridgewater.
Yeah, the homes.
The homes and I believe some of the businesses.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Bridgewater,
yeah,
they have it.
yeah.
Even though I don't think we can, or maybe we can, but I don't know, restrict their use, potentially on their draw, could it adversely affect the town's draw on any of the wells, or is it situated so that one does not affect the other?
Well, what happens is when we did the Vernon Street rock wells, we did a pump testing. They have to go out to private wells to see how it does affect the static water level, basically. There was only one well, I believe, in that area that got affected by a foot.
Okay.
So that wasn't bad, but the other wells were not affected. I know DP long ago was trying to have towns restrict wells that go into the ground and monitor them and tell them how much they can withdraw. And I think that went to the wayside because I never heard any more about that. So, but each well, if they're near our well, they're going to affect us.
Okay, so there could be a private well could affect a public well, depending on where it is.
Depending where it is.
Okay.
But there are like buffer zones that the DEP set up between over the wellheads is like a 400 radius.
Right.
protective area. So it does pull out of the same aquifers, basically.
And the reason I bring that up too is just to make those private well owners aware that potentially not only could it affect their well, because it could go dry,
Mhm.
but it also could adversely affect the town well, depending on where they are.
Right.
It's just a consideration. I don't think we're sitting here trying to discuss how we could control them, but make them aware of that.
Mhm.
Everyone loves to see green grass, everyone likes to see that, but hopefully, from this, even the private well owners will identify the fact that maybe they need to ratchet things down as well for the benefit of themselves as well as the town. So, thank you.
You're welcome. If I may just make one comment in that regard, it's always been my impression that the natural resources that are beneath my property are in fact part of my property. And if I find there's oil there, or water, or gold, I'm entitled to proceeds of that.
That's right, Dad, right?
What I'd rather discuss with you is actually a feedback question.
Yep.
Now, I know that we've now understood that we're level at 20 parts per trillion is really very conservative. And as Mr. Dutton has indicated, there are municipalities and states where there can be vastly larger acceptable limits. My question is this: on a few occasions, and I do believe there have only been a few, that we have exceeded and been notified and been required to actually send public notice to citizens that we've exceeded the limit. By how much of a factor have we exceeded?
One quarter we exceeded by 1 part per trillion.
Okay,
The next time we exceeded, I believe, was 3 parts per trillion.
so it's a very modest
Correct.
over the threshold amount.
Yep.
Nonetheless, and we do have a very conservative amount of
The other problem though, too, is when we did exceed one time, I decided to make a split sample. And I sent them to 2 different labs, 2 different results. When you're talking parts per trillion, 3 points could be huge. So even the labs are not getting consistent numbers between them. And the DEP knows this. But they're trying to get some kind of standardization on it.
One question, if I may, just to follow up on water is with respect to groundwater. And we know that we have rust conditions, and you've spoken about periodic flushing.
Yeah, it's the iron and manganese, basically.
Is there really a long-term solution that's practical for the
Yeah.
town of Bridgewater to consider?
Actually, when the new plant comes online, that has filters to it. And then we're still looking at wells 10A and 10B off of Plymouth Street that basically just has chemical treatment, but no filtration. We're looking at a system there. But the new plant on High Street will take care of those wells. Those 4 wells on High Street do not have filtration. It's just pump, chemical, and gone. Whereas Carver's Pond has chemicals, filtration, and then it goes to the public. So once that plant gets up and running and we finally get the pipes cleaned out, the quality of the water will be much better.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Moore.
Yep. Through you to the superintendent. Thank you. Water is near and dear to my heart. I think Bridgewater has many #1 priorities. This is to me the real #1. Without it, the other ones can't happen. So I think I just want to make sure I'm understanding the data. So you'd said we're allowed 1.89 million gallons per day. So that's the capacity. That's the total
Correct.
amount we can produce. We're
That's our
currently
withdrawal. That's the DP withdrawal, right?
great. And we're currently pulling 1.6, 1.7.
Correct.
So we are currently consistently at 85%, if
Mhm.
my math is right, 85% of our available
I
capacity.
trust your math.
Yeah. And I guess my question is, as you're watching that sort of meter go up and down, what level does it need to get to for us to accelerate some of these response actions?
We can accelerate them right now. Now's the time to do it before we get to that critical stage. Because right now, I'm sure Mr. Dutton told you, all our wells are basically running. The last time they rested was back in June 27th. They rested for 3 hours. Other than that, they've been going 24/7. The only 2 wells I try to avoid to use are 10A and 10B because they're the problem ones. So The other wells have been constantly running, and then with PFAS thrown in it, where I have to throttle back another well, I'm losing gallons there. It's all a big spider web we have to take care of.
Got it. And maybe just to follow up to that, so the new treatment plant, we expect to help with brown water across the whole town, or is it a sort of a
That's,
section of
those
the town?
4 wells will go to that new treatment plant. There's 4 wells on High Street that go directly to the new well, to the new plant, excuse me. And now those 4 wells will only go to that plant for right now.
I see. And then so residents sort of in that side of Bridgewater would expect to see an improvement, or residents across all of Bridgewater? would
Well,
expect to
I
see-
can't put a line in the sand saying, you get your water from here, you get your water from there. But if you live closer there, it's more than likely you're getting your water from there.
And then maybe just the last question on the wells, just to make sure I understand it. So currently we have a certain amount of wells, and to meet this 85%, we are like pushing these things to the limit. When one goes down, we're trying to fix it quickly, but we don't have like the spare tire that we can pull.
We don't, yeah,
Right,
the only
so-
spare tires we have are those 2 wells, 10A and 10B, which
Yeah. You
those are
don't
last
wait.
resort wells.
Yeah. So just in terms of urgency, I think I'm hearing, we're at a capacity level where we should notice. And one of the urgent actions is to understand how do we potentially bring more wells online to help bring some relief to the system. Is that generally?
Yeah, like Mrs. Dunn said, if we can get the Vernon Street and Beach Street wells online, at least we can rotate all our wells to rest.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilor Perry.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions. I think these are probably a couple of the biggest questions the public has is, firstly, do we know potentially how much longer we'll have the water restrictions that we have in place? An estimate as to when we might change that up?
I can, right now, even though we've been upgraded on our drought, the towers are not recovering quick enough. So it's still the usage amongst everything else that's going on in the town. Overnight, I believe we went up another 3 feet. We're usually around 70, 80 mark on Sprague Tower that's on Broad Street. We were down to 63. One time, after a weekend, we were down to critical stage. We were on under 50 feet in that tank. And so that's when all the triggers got hit, and we started doing the sprinkler patrol. We started doing the fines. But, as some people just don't care, we should have to keep going out there and trying to catch these people. And some people really did listen. And we did get phone calls saying, thank you for, doing this and letting, at least letting water vegetable gardens anyways. But we're slowly getting back there, but we're not rebounding quick enough.
So you don't really have an estimate at this point in
No.
time?
Well, once the heat comes down,
Right.
and the usage, outside usage goes down, it should start coming back up like it always does in the winter.
Which is good. And then secondarily, I don't know, again, a lot of people, as we talked about brown water stuff, can you speak to what you feel the current quality of our drinking water is to kind of allay the fears of a lot of the.
It's kind of hard to say. My side of town where I live, it's fine. I turn on my tap. Everywhere I've gone, I turn on the tap, it's fine. I'm at the sewer plant most of the time. It's fine.
Yeah.
I've been to, houses that can be complaining, and not the majority, but some of the houses, they need to clean out like their hot water tanks, because that's just like a sedimentation basin for them. So when they turn on the hot, they're getting brown.
Right.
But if they turn on the cold, it's clear.
Right.
We're getting a lot of that. We go out there whenever there's a complaint, we look at what's going on, we'll take a sample, we'll analyze it.
Right.
And it's usually just an aesthetics issue.
Yep.
And if something gets disrupted, if there was a fire in the area or there was a break in the area, it's going to disrupt everything in the lines.
As far as the safety and the quality of as the water for drinking, you feeling it?
The quality of water is at DEP levels. It's just an aesthetic issue.
Yep.
It's the iron and the manganese that once that new treatment plant gets up online, it's going to take those 4 wells and, filter it.
And you feel it's been the same now as it has been for the past 20, 30 years?
Well, I haven't been around that long here.
In general, 'cause,
Yes, you
I mean,
have.
The
Feels
history
like
of
I have.
The history of the town is, we always used to feel like we had great drinking water. here
Yeah,
in
no,
the town
it's,
of Bridgewater.
it's the same. It's the same over the past couple of years. It's just a matter of it's getting more and more use out of it, more and more withdrawal.
Thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate that.
welcome.
Yeah, I had a related question, if I may. So you talked about the, 24/7, maybe it'll dial back as winter sets on. How does what's currently happening affecting your schedule to open the new treatment plant?
This has nothing to do with the treatment plant. The treatment plant was pushed back because of manufacturing problems. And actually, one thing was the IO module cards that runs the plant. We could never get a definitive answer from the company of when we'd have them. So it kept getting pushed months and months. And by the time they got them, there was no way we could take down the wells on High Street to do the work, because this work has to be done at the wells too.
Well, that's what I mean. So you need to take wells down. They're all operating 24/7.
Right.
Is our current situation going to affect your ability to take them down?
No, what's going to happen is they're not taking them down till late fall, so that should be fine. They're only taking down 2 wells at a time, which if I need to, I will turn on 10A and 10B.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Seeing none, I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to committee reports, are there any committee reports that the council would like to offer this evening? Seeing none, there is just a report that I'll a little later on for the September 1st special town council that was held. We'll talk about this for the election warrant. Moving on to legislation for action. Ordinance FY 22-021 zoning ordinance, application of zoning bylaws to the ordinances. And wood. And I just note that in fact, this particular legislation has been recommended. Typographical errors were recommended. This hearing has been really analyzed and analyzed on the county website and considered. The comments of the councilors Columbotus or Wood would care to offer at this point? Councilor Wood.
Sure. During the process and someone in the opening comments made reference to it, we did have a lot of workshops. We tried to have as many workshops as was feasible with a large number of people that were attended. A lot of people reviewed the changes. I think in the packet here, you see a summary of changes. It's difficult to do a side-by-side comparison because of the restructuring. In general, they don't change, but it is restructured. The language has changed in some cases. And during those workshops, in our hearings with the planning board and our CEDC meeting, we worked through all those changes. So I think we're in pretty good shape tonight.
Thank you, Councilor. I just in that regard, if I may just preliminary point out that in our meeting materials this evening, I think it's concise 2-page summary that shows sections of zoning bylaws and what section they now are comprised in proposed zoning ordinances. And I think that for purposes of the question was raised by a member of the public earlier, that it's actually a reference for someone in that position. See where the say that. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
That's a motion for approval and a second. Thank you. Is there further discussion? Before I roll.
Dr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
And Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much. And the next item order FY 23-00. Transfer to order capital leasing obligations. The Budget and Finance Committee is approved it at their August 31st meeting, and the finance committee voted.
President, this capital transfer funds a number of our lease vehicles, specifically final payment on one of our lease support payments on fire engines. Second payment of a 5-year payment on fire radio equipment lease. Last payment firearm simulator. Second payment on police tasers. Second payment on camera system. Appropriates money for the third and 12 payments to the town. Next purchase.
So.
Second.
You have a motion and a second.
Dr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chase, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood
Yes.
and Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you. We have no old business, we have several items of new business. First, order FY 23-00, acceptance of gift funding. And we ask please for Dr. Thomas.
Mr. President, as part of an approval for the warehouse currently being constructed at 900 Bedford Street, the planning board received some mitigation funding to the tune of $20,000 to fund the planting of trees around town. And as you know, several citizens are on an ad hoc tree committee charged with coming up with a permanent committee that will eventually make recommendations for the use of these funds.
I'll make a motion to refer to the budget finance committee.
Second.
Second. Motion and a second.
Dr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood
Yes.
and Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much. Order FY 23-010, acceptance of gift, COA.
Mr. President, this grant of $5,205 from Cultivating Community Connections is intended to programmatically help ease some of the social isolation and loneliness of specifically seniors and residents, largely due to the pandemic.
Make a motion to refer to the budget and finance committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? None.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
and Dr. Perry.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Order FY 23-011, acceptance of assistant firefighters grants and.
Mr. President, this compilation of grants is quite a coup for the work, quite a compliment for the work that the fire department's done to secure these. One is a training grant, which is designed to allow paramedics to practice without getting into too many gory details on flesh, real flesh. And the other is capital equipment replacement to fund the a new tank for oxygen tank filling up. But I do want to take note that Captain Grafton, Lieutenant Wainio, and firefighter Mike Sullivan, as well as Renee Rushton over the fire department, really did do yeoman's work in securing these grants. So my thanks to them.
For
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? None? Got a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Wood? Mr. Rushton?
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you. Order FY 23-012. Voters decide. Order being proposed by myself and Councilor Wood.
Thank you. Just trying to find it in the agenda here. There we go. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to just thank our attorney, Jason Rollins, for helping me to edit this into a shape that's that we're able to put it on the ballot directly. So the genesis behind this, first of all, let's be clear, it's not an order that allows the council to change the ban at all, up or down. It's the ability to send a measure to the voters and let them decide if they want to modify the general ban. It's very specific in nature. During the research last summer about the Mansfield case, it became very clear that the Supreme Judicial Court talked about the exception that's in the Mass General Law 94G, which limits the ability for local control in certain cases. And in those cases, it has to do with having your documentation in order prior to July 1st, 2017. And both of our medical marijuana treatment centers meet those levels of engagement. So one would think that they could challenge us in court, because what the exception says in the state law, which prevails over anything we do at the local level, is that local control cannot use zoning ordinances and bylaws to limit the ability of an MMTC to transfer to a retail. And what Supreme Judicial Court Justice Budd said was that it was the state intent to allow the treatment centers to convert to retail. Last year, we had a non-binding question, which was directed to should we have retail in Bridgewater, and that won by 57%. So there was a lot of criticism of that vote. And there were two major ones. One was it was non-binding, and the second one was it was only 11% of the vote. Well, 11% of the vote is just about double of what we usually see in a normal town vote. It's far exceeds what we normally get as our election. I mean, Pete won by 2 votes, literally 2 votes a couple of years ago. And so low vote numbers happen. And so if you look at the votes on the fire department exemption, debt exclusion, or the school debt exclusion, you'll find that the numbers are probably pretty similar. 3,000 people show up, half vote for yes, half vote no, et cetera. The demographics and construction of Bridgewater has changed significantly since 2016. The voters who voted in 2016 are not the people that live in Bridgewater today. The voters today are different in numbers, where they live, how they feel, et cetera. So the only way that we can understand what the voters today intent means is to put a question out to them. The question is constructed specific to the exception that's in the state law. The question is specific to allowing the 2, they don't have to, but allowing the 2 MMTC treatment centers to convert to retail, just like the state intended for those that engaged in business before July 1st, 2017. The question doesn't change the ban for other new retail shops. And that answers one of the questions that one of the comments had earlier. Would this allow other retail shops to come in? No, by putting an exception to the general ban, it will still prohibit any new shops from coming to Bridgewater. They have no ground to stand on and sue, saying that we had a misplaced ban and that they can now show up and open shop. That won't change at all. If the voters decide to allow the exception in the general law, it only applies to the two MMTC businesses because they engaged in operations prior to 2017, as Chief Justice Budd said in her judgment in the Mansfield case. This is democracy in action. And I'm not asking the council in this question to decide yes or no. The voters are smart people here in town. They brought us a new elementary school. They brought us a new fire station. They are generally well-educated people when it comes time to vote. They will look at the risks, look at the costs, look at the benefits, and make a decision on their own. And so that's why I put the question forward. And if you look at the language, it's tied to whatever our next special or regular town meeting is. So there's no additional cost. It just becomes part of the function of the regular town vote on that particular day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
I'll make a motion to move to rules and procedure.
We have a motion and
I'll second.
And a second. Thank you very much. I would just like to add a couple of brief comments. And firstly, I look back to the 2016 vote, which was a statewide issue where towns could make a determination as to whether they choose to restrict, eliminate potential sale in their communities. I recall that in Bridgewater, the vote to prohibit marijuana was by a margin of 50 votes. Now we can speak at length about voter turnout, voter participation. We certainly all want to see high voter turnout, active voter participation. It was certainly very encouraging to see the voter input here this evening. I think that the title of this action is very aptly let voters decide. Back when we had the last year when we put on the ballot a non-binding question to this effect, actually it was a non-binding question that was broader than this. This is actually much more restrictive than the question to the president. But when we did this a year ago, I remember commenting that I felt, how would we be faulted for putting the question entirely in the hands of the voters? In my view, and I said this at the time as well, I know specifically, I would rather we had more opportunities to put specific questions directly in the hands of the voters. And I, for that reason, have chosen to support this measure. And I think that it should be a question at this point for the voters. Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, we have this discussion, and I appreciate all the comments early in the meeting. But maybe it is time to put this before the voters. Maybe, and we'll have that vote at another meeting. However, this is not democracy in action. This is specific and allowing and restricting and gearing it towards one specific person, one specific element of the business. This does not allow the overall sale of recreational marijuana to those that may want to do it. This is not democracy in action. And I feel as though that we're honing in on two businesses because of challenges in court, when in fact the legislature is currently, and they're scrambling actually to tighten up the issues that have happened in Mansfield. Tighten up the legislation because of the flaw in the way it was written. So if they do that, then maybe we are not going to be able to disapprove the conversion. This, I think, is an easier way to get it done, so we can do it now. But I do think that if Bridgewater is going to allow recreational, perhaps, yes, perhaps maybe it's time to ask the voters again. But it should not be restricted. It should be, okay, let's have an open process. That's what democracy is. And this is not an open process. But going to the voters, yes, but specifically, I don't think if we're going to allow it, I think it's to be an open process and allow perhaps the ones that are referenced here to apply for those licenses. And maybe another business that may want to come into town. So, Mr. President, this is being referred to, I use the rules and procedure. Not, is that, that's the appropriate committee to send this to, I guess.
Okay. So,
Yes.
I would also like to consider sending this to. I think that would be the appropriate place for this. Because we do have, both from a rules and procedures perspective, but also, I think there's been a lot of talk on the economic impact, both plus and minus. And I think that would be the proper place to have those discussions as well.
Well, I'll second that.
Very good. So can we agree on modifying the original motion? And
I didn't
Well,
make it,
this
so
is,
I'd like to.
well, this is a sub motion anyway, but
all right, so there's a motion to put forward to submit it to both the Community and Economic Development Committee as well as the. All right, thank you very much.
so we're amending the first motion.
Yes.
And I'd like to speak on this motion.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea to send it to CDC. The reason being is that there is an economic factor here. When people talk about the cost of having marijuana shops in their community, they envision higher crime and they envision higher other things. The reality is that isn't happening and hasn't happened in the communities that have adopted. I think we can take a look at that. Secondly, there was a change that the governor signed on August 11th to the marijuana law, and it limits the number of years the community can get host money. And so I believe we're into year 6 of our host agreements. The limit is 8. So in 2 years, we will lose at least $200,000 of revenue from our budget. And we should talk about that in the CEDC meeting as well.
Further comment, yes, Councilor Moore.
Yeah, I think first off, I wanted to thank everyone who came and spoke about this. I know there's a lot of personal passion, some that are here and some that have left. And I appreciate it and listen to all the comments. So I think for me, one of the language things I keep hearing, both in the comments and from the council, is that we've prohibited recreational marijuana. We actually haven't. So to me, as a state, the majority voted to allow recreational marijuana. There are people in Bridgewater right now that are going out and buying it and using it. And as a state, we have said that that's okay. And I think, similar to the earlier comment of, as a community, what do we want to do? And I can tell you, this is one of those issues that people who are for it do not stand up in front of a room and announce it. I don't know why, but they don't. But they do very much in personal conversations talk about supporting it. And so I do think that sentiment in Bridgewater has changed on this issue. I think the community is in a different place now than they were. There are certainly a lot of factors that I don't think are tied to whether or not we have a retail facility in Bridgewater. I think there are factors that just need to be dealt with because of the state decision, not because of where somebody buys it. But I think so for those reasons, I do think sentiment has changed, and I think aligned with sort of democracy working, I think we need to allow people to express their voice there. So I think this is a good idea in time to put it on the ballot.
Thank you,
One of the things we're all getting in a conversation with police. They have a meeting with understand that a number of those fees are reporting increase. Motor vehicle accidents. And says, if that is happening there, it's going to happen here. And maybe we're going to bring in some more tax money. He says, so how are we going to afford the additional police officers to handle, first of all, the growth in the town, the problem brought on by marijuana. And that's what he said. And I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't think. And I think finally what we have to look at, there was many, many years that businesses had a lot of problems coming in town. Look what's happened in the past 2 years. How many new businesses have come in? How many big ones have come in? How many tax dollars are they bringing in? How many current projects are going on right now? What tax revenue is going to be coming in from them when those projects are finished? Okay. That's the thing that we have to look at, and that's what I'm looking at.
First off, I have a question through you to the town attorney, Mr. Rollins. So Bridgewater, by law, can only, if we have retail, can only issue 2 licenses, correct? Within Bridgewater, I thought there was a,
It would depend on what was allowed and what wasn't allowed under this particular legislation, which is what we're talking about, or what's being proposed. It would only be a maximum of 2.
Right.
Yeah.
But isn't a town, city or town capped at the maximum number per 10,000 residents?
I don't want to answer the hypotheticals because I want to focus on this particular one because
All right, then I'm
I'm
going to make a statement under the assumption that that's the case. If I'm wrong, I apologize. So that's the reason. The only reason I'm asking is because this is where I'm going to go. So I did a little math the other day. So out of 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth, 43% are different from when they voted state versus local. So that's the combination either way. Of that, 32 communities voted yes statewide and no locally. 11 communities voted no statewide, but allow retail in their communities. So around 12%. The reason I put that out there is that I personally do not have any indication of how Bridgewater is going to vote. From the beginning, 3+ years ago, I said that question should have been put in front of the voters. I had 0 support. Here we are today, talking about putting this in front of the voters 3+ years later, with all of the discussion, all of the angst and things of that nature. That's why, from my perspective, I do support putting it in front of the voters to have them decide either way. And on top of that, 308 communities have actually stayed the course. Whatever they voted statewide, they are continuously here today. I am not in support, though, of an ordinance that is put towards benefiting only 2 businesses in Bridgewater. I don't think we've ever had that. If we're going to do this, we need to do it the right way. And what I mean by that is put it in front of the voters to change so that retail can be allowed in Bridgewater with restrictions. I've always said that, churches, schools, things of that nature. Now, again, my understanding, I could be wrong, is that Bridgewater would only be allowed to issue up to 3 licenses. Going on that assumption, that would be potentially 1 more than we're talking about here today. But that's not the point of the matter. The point of the matter is, if we're going to maximize the benefit, if that's what's being sold here, then we better give everyone who wants to come in Bridgewater, if it is approved, the ability and opportunity to come in. But that doesn't mean that if it's put in front of the voters, it will be approved. So even though I am in support of putting it in front of the voters, and I will support referring this to the community, I'll be very vocal that what I want to see back here is a vote around changing our zoning to allow retail in Bridgewater. People are going to have to decide for themselves, is the economic benefit worth it, or what potentially it could affect them? It could be a multitude of things. But I'm not going to support keeping it within a small group because people are concerned that that the public is going to vote in a way that they don't believe in. That's not the way we work. My expectation, be it at the state level or the local level, is that people go out and educate themselves, and they come in with an informed decision. And when that vote is taken, we live by that decision. So I am not sitting here saying, if we put it in front of the voters, it's going to go one way or the other. I do not know. What I do know, though, is that the town of Bridgewater, the voters of Bridgewater, deserve the right to have a voice on this either way. Thank you.
Further comment?
I just had a thought of the clarification, Councilor George, that you may be looking for. So in the legislation that was passed and refined in 2017, the cap, if you adopt it, is 20% of your liquor licenses. So it's based on number of liquor licenses. So if you look at the town of Swansea and find theirs, they actually didn't zone any place. They allow retail. They actually don't have any retail stores right now because 2 towns next door to them do and are probably popular. But the way they set up their acceptance was up to a certain number, up to the 20% of liquor licenses. So it's variable. If they increase their liquor licenses, it'll increase.
So if memory's correct, 20% of our liquor licenses.
Yeah, I think so. If I may, so the reason I crafted it specifically to the 2 medical isn't because I'm favoring a particular business. It's because the exception that's been in the law at the state level since 2017 says that they can. And no one's challenged that yet. So the law was based on the having been engaged in business. And that's what the battle was in Mansfield. And so Chief Justice Budd clarified the definition of engaged. And it clearly says that if you are in the process of becoming a business, you are engaged in that business, even though you're not selling your product yet. And so with that clarification, that means that these 2 businesses could potentially litigate against Bridgewater and say, listen, we were signed as a host agreement with provisional before July 1st, 2017. We were engaged in business and we should have an exception. That's why I crafted it with the specific language that it is.
With all due respect, and I appreciate your explanation, I'm still in total disagreement that we can't sit here and talk about potential or could or may. We have to look at it from the perspective of what's in front of us now and what's the best course of action. Hence the reason I'm saying, put this in front of the voters to say, do they want retail marijuana shops in Bridgewater or not? Not to craft this around trying to mitigate a potential lawsuit. We can't go in that direction. We do not know. So I think by just putting it out there and getting the will of the people, then we can work around exactly how we structure that. That is my approach to this. I'm just making it from my own personal perspective as well as others that I've spoken to.
And just to clarify, that I don't like the idea of talking about lawsuits or litigation, period. I don't think it's appropriate for what you have before you. If there is the possibility of pending lawsuits or litigation, that would be for executive session, not for an open meeting. I don't believe there is at this time, but that's why I'm not answering hypotheticals. And that's why I don't think this matter has anything to do with that. I think this matter has to do with whether or not this particular item goes to the voters. That's what you all are to be discussing. The idea of contemplating or making up arguments over the potentiality of lawsuits or litigations or hypotheticals doesn't further the town, nor does it further the council. So that's why I refuse to answer a hypothetical on this matter, because I don't think it furthers what you all are actually debating on the matter at hand. Just for clarification.
Mr. Chair, so on that note, like to the town attorneys.
So you want to talk about litigation now?
I want to talk about this whole order. You're saying putting something like this before the voters, this specific is fine.
I think you have under the charter authority to put questions before the voters to be binding. I have crafted the bottom portion of this. There are some, I think, portions that I did not craft, but I crafted the question itself because that was the inquiry provided to me, was whether or not the voters would vote to essentially amend, right, or create an exemption to the current bylaws. And so that's what this says. And yes, it's an appropriately drafted question. And I think it's appropriately decided by the voters, if that's what you all choose to have happen.
It's a referendum, essentially.
It is. It is.
But would something this specific violate anything else, particularly the acts that the governor signed relative to equity? I mean, are we opening ourselves up?
No, I don't think so. I think you're, but you're asking about this specific question, which is fine. This specific question, all it does is allow for conversion, right? It allows for conversion, and whether or not that was contemplated previously by the legislature or anything along those lines is another story. But this particular question is just opening up the possibility of you governing how many shops there are or how many shops there aren't, or the citizens of the town of Bridgewater governing how many shops there are, how many shops there aren't. And so those are all acceptable actions under 94G, right? 94G is all about local control and what limitations are on local control. So you can say there can only be two, or you can say there can be more. So I think it's an acceptably drafted question. I think the question itself and the exception that it's creating, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. And I think it's even more valid in some aspects from all of your perspectives, from the democracy perspective, when it's voted on by the voters, right? So I think that kind of eliminates any of that perceived bias or other things that you're, I think, alluding to, right, indirectly, that one group is getting favored over another. Well, if it's the voters that vote, it's not you all, right? The voters are voting. It's democracy. So
true, and I think that the voters are going to look at this is they're voting to allow retail marijuana.
That's not what this says.
That's what the perception will be when they go to vote.
Well, you guys are the politicians, so you're going to have to clarify that for the voters.
That's like, all these questions on the ballot in November. It's yes or no, but
right.
Yes really means no. People get confused sometimes.
Yeah, so I tried to, when I wrote the question itself, be very specific. And I also, in the explanation, I kept it very simple, right? I just did 4 bullet points. They're unbiased. They're very clear. This will allow the voters of Bridgewater a direct decision in a binding ordinance. This ordinance will allow the conversion of 2 existing medical marijuana facilities to 2 marijuana retailers. Marijuana retailers can directly sell, deliver, or otherwise transfer marijuana or marijuana products to consumers. And this ordinance limits the number of possible conversions of medical marijuana treatment centers to marijuana retailers to 2. So I did those 4 bullet points to be as clear cut and specific. So I know what you're saying a lot, and I agree with you. When I go to vote, right, I read the explanation, I go, I don't know what that says.
That first sentence says it all. No one's gonna read anything further. And I think the legislature.
But they should, because they're voting.
Is going to take care of everything further.
Well, maybe they will, maybe,
know that.
but that's a hypothetical. Again,
We know that they're working on it, we know it's up there, and we know it's been drafted. So, and I don't know what the actual question will actually look like when it comes to us, when we have to sign a warrant to put it out there.
well, I will be weighing in on the actual question. The question itself needs to be specific as to what's being changed in the ordinance. It needs to fit. And that's why it was written the way it was. So there are no terms after the therefore that could in any way be perceived as anything other than this is what this question says, this is what this question does. And I've voted in many elections. I've never seen one explanation that's 4 bullet points that I think anyone would understand that if they read it. So that was why it was drafted that way, to make sure your concerns were alleviated.
And
Correct.
again, it's the process of retail marijuana in Massachusetts, there's licenses that need to be issued. We're the licensing board, the council, I believe we would approve those licenses. We would have to.
The Cannabis Commission would approve the licenses, but yeah.
In this case, we're not allowing an open process. We're allowing a conversion.
Well, that's for you all to debate. I just wrote the question.
Well, based on the request. Yeah.
Correct.
Councilor Kirk?
Just quick, through to the town attorney again. So again, not to deal with hypotheticals, but depending on which way the vote would go on this particular question, and the state or the courts make decisions going forward that could oppose or be different from what we're voting as a town, what then supersedes our actions going forward? Obviously, the state or judicial decisions?
Yeah, I mean, it'll depend on what the state law says and how it's effective and whether or not it has retroactive applicability or effectiveness. So
But it could
again,
be-
it's all hypothetical.
I know.
And that's why I think it's not a useful exercise. I
Yeah.
think what we have to focus on is whether or not, number one, this is the question you all want to send to the voters. If it is, then start working on it in committee. If it isn't, obviously someone else can propose an alternate question. Or someone can ask for an amendment to this particular question. You can actually have 2 questions on the ballot. If there are conflicting decisions on those questions, we actually have an amendment section of our charter that talks about that. So there are a litany of options for you all in terms of sending this. But I think what your discussion now needs to be focused on is what the question is and what you actually want to send to the voters, because that's really what we're talking about here. So we can debate this, we can debate all the stuff that you all want to debate till, whenever you want to debate it till. But from my perspective as the town attorney, I'm not going to get involved in that. All I'm concerned with is what is the question? Is it a legal question? And what do you want to send to the voters? And that's what I would answer.
And this could be referred as is, but come back from committee, total change.
You all can change whatever you want. Yeah,
I'm talking even at the committee level.
well, proposed changes could come
Come
back.
back to us as well. So I don't necessarily think it's worthwhile to have that discussion here. But I think that's the overall point, at least from my perspective, is at the end of the day, I want to see this as a question that goes out to the voters in regards to allowing it or not.
And then obviously you all had discussed the possibility of sending it to multiple committees. So that obviously you'd have to vote to suspend your rules because typically you guys send it to one committee. I believe there was a vote or someone had proposed sending it to 2 committees. So I would just vote to suspend the rules. And
Send all money articles to.
Finance committee is different than one of your subcommittees, 2 different things. So it is atypical and it is outside of your normal procedures to send to multiple committees, which is fine. I just think, there could be conflicting issues, but we'll deal with those as they come. If that's what this, the collective knowledge of the board wants, I think you just vote to suspend the rules and then send to whatever committees you want to do. But I would leave that up to you all.
If you're sensitive to that,
So moved.
all right. we'll need to have a motion for a vote first on the question of suspending the rules. Have a roll call vote on that.
Dr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
No.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood
Yes.
and Mr. Rushton.
Yes.
8 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you. And the main motion before us is just your.
Sounds good.
The main motion before us is to refer the matter to both the community and the rules and procedures. There's no further discussion. Let's have a roll call vote.
Mr. Rushton,
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the chair on the motion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rushing, Councilor Rushing, this is to act on the main motion to submit, to refer this matter to both committees.
Okay, understood. Thank you. No.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
No.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
No.
Dr. Perry.
Yes.
6-3, motion passes.
The end.
2023-005, 2023 town election warrant. A little bit of background, I'll try to make this as painless as possible. There's a general level of understanding, certainly among the council, hopefully among the public. We were not able to conduct the town election in April of 2022 did not allow for the election of members to the town council as customarily in the case because charter amendments were required to be adopted, which were adopted, and they were submitted as required to the state legislature for approval. And we were in a period during which that approval had not taken place. Subsequently, the approval by the legislature has taken place, and the various amendments, which include things like changing the composition of the council membership itself, have been approved. Nonetheless, it's been a very confusing process for everyone involved. At a point, we were informed that the legislature had, in fact, passed the measure, when in reality, they weren't. It was still in committee. We also learned at a point that the governor had signed the measure, had enacted the law, and we learned that, well, wait, it's not effective yet because there was no emergency preamble attached to the emergency measure. So, 30-day period would need to ensue before it could become effective. So, we've had a lot of false starts and a lot of confusion. But what's before us right now is the proposal to have the town election under the new legislation, which now has been approved and signed by the governor, and will soon be, the expiration of that 30-day period will soon have transpired, and actually consider election day for the purpose of electing members. I did schedule a special council meeting on August 29, and it was an emergency meeting, and that was necessary because what was being considered at that meeting on August 29 was the possibility of the council approving an election date on November 8th, which is the upcoming state election date. It's our electing members of Congress and elections will be occurring. We considered the possibility of making a double election in effect. There would be 2 ballots. And in order to do that, if we were to do that, the meeting on August 29 was set up so that we could begin the timetable because it was a very narrow window of opportunity to do that. However, on August 29, hours before we actually opened up, we learned that the governor had not, the governor had not attached the emergency preamble to the legislation on his signature, and therefore the 30-day period would have to last before the law would become effective. And so at that point, the meeting became, I won't say moot, but we couldn't vote as we had intended at the outset on ours. It was no longer an emergency because November 8th was taken out of our hands. It was no longer going to be possible to work to prepare for the presumed November 8th election. So at that meeting on August 29th, we considered two possibilities. One was, and this met with some approval, it was a suggestion we should have our town clerk and I think also our town attorney that January 7th of 2023 would be an appropriate date. There were reasons that it was seen to be a convenient date, and there were reasons that it was thought to be frankly inconvenient. We considered that just by consensus, but not a vote. We also considered the possibility on August 29th that perhaps postpone until our usual town election date, our annual town election date in late April. I think that's the 22nd. What we have now come to learn, and this point, is that our town attorney has concluded that it will not be possible for us to consider an April date for the election. Therefore, I would say we're back at square one, but certainly it looks to be the case that the proposed January 7th date with that much background and without anything else to say, I think I would entertain a motion for approval or amendment if you choose, but so that we could begin the discussion.
I just have a general question for you, for the town attorney. So January 7th, do 8 councilors have to run?
I don't have the exact layout in front of me, but I believe on that day, there will be an election for all but one. And correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, because, and I had it confused in my head that the 7th would be like 3 and then the.
No, what will happen, it starts to stagger thereafter. So then shortly thereafter in April, there will be the normal election for, and again, I don't have the charter amendment memorized, but I think it's 2 more counselors at that time.
Two at large, 1 district.
There you go. So 3 at that time.
8 in January, 3 in April.
That's correct. And then we get into, so then from there, it's built in where it staggers.
Will the people that run in January know if they have to run again in April, or is that done after the election?
What do you mean? Yeah, they'll have. Oh, so it's in the charter change. Yeah, it actually tells the people who are up in the April election. So it was drafted in that way. So they'll know. Yes, that is correct. Yep.
So that was the EPV.
Yes.
There were actually 4 councilors who would be elected on January 7th, who would then need to be re-elected to stand for election again in April at the annual election. Right. They would be 3 district councilors, and whichever councilor may choose to run for the 1-year term. So 4 would be subject to that. So January.
I thought it was 3. It's not going to be 4 in April, it'll be 3.
It'll be 3.
It'll be 8 in.
Yeah, I got to pull up the legislation. I don't have it in front.
We have to get the town clerk here. Can we have her come up for clarification?
Absolutely.
If you have the legislation.
We don't have the legislation.
Okay. And the districts.
You know.
I do not know which districts for sure.
I'll see if I can.
In the April election, Councillor Gallagher will be continuing. His term is not up until 24, and he's an at-large councillor, so he stands. He stands through both elections, through if there is a January 7th one, and then through the April one. So there would be the one district counselor and one precinct counselor that will run. Well, one district counselor, which is the 3 precincts. So the precincts of the district, one, and then one at large, right? So really 2 are going to run then.
And
Normally, every year, there will be 2 at-larges and 1 district counselor who run. In a normal year, that's how we'll be, because you're going to have 3 districts, you're going to have 6 at-large. So there will always be 2 and 1, right? It's 3.
But you're saying in April of 2023.
It will just be 2 because Dennis will be continuing for 1 more year till 24.
So just 2 districts. So they
Yeah,
might-
but I think if I may,
One
at
dis-
large.
One district
Oh,
one
at large.
district.
Oh, yeah.
and
2
1
at
at large.
Yeah, can we find the?
I'm looking.
Can you find it? Because the way we constructed it, because knowing that Dennis carried on till 2024, we set it up so that the district that he sits in would not be the one that comes up in the same election in that particular cycle, but it's one, so in the January, it would
Well,
be
he's an
8.
at-large.
Yeah,
Bill,
right.
so, yeah.
So in the January, if it's January, it would be Dennis sits out and 8 seats are open.
I have the actual verbiage. So
Go ahead,
if you
Mr.
wanna hear
Attorney.
if you want to hear what it says the election of the newly constituted town council shall occur within 180 days of the effective date of this act. The town council elected pursuant to subsection A, which is that section, shall take office immediately upon election and certification, subject to the following transitional provisions. The term of office of a district councilor serving prior to election of subsection A shall immediately expire, right? So that's obvious. And the term of office of each district councilor elected pursuant to subsection A shall commence upon certification of the election. The term of office of a councilor at large serving prior to the election in subsection A shall immediately expire. And the term of office of each councilor at large elected pursuant to subsection A shall commence upon certification, provided, however, that any councilor at large serving prior to the election in subsection A that has not fulfilled their full term of office shall be entitled to serve the remainder of the term for which they are elected to serve. That would be Dennis. The term of office of the district councilor elected pursuant to subsection A to serve District 2 shall expire upon the election and certification of a successor at the April 2023 election, annual town election. The term of office of the district councilor elected pursuant to subsection A to serve District 1 shall expire upon the election and certification of a successor at the April 2024 election. The term of office of the district councilor elected pursuant to subsection A to serve District 3 shall expire upon election and certification of a successor at the April 2025 election, annual town election. The term of office of a councilor at large elected pursuant to subsection A shall be as follows. 2 councilors at large shall serve upon election pursuant to subsection A until April 2025. 1 councilor at large shall serve upon election pursuant to subsection A until April 2024. 2 councilors at large shall serve upon election pursuant to subsection A until April 2023 annual town election.
And then we get into the regular cycle.
Then we get into
3
a cycle.
per
Correct.
election.
That just establishes the
So-
stagger.
I think what was confusing is you initially thought you were going to have an election like last April that was going to work and was going to set it in motion. And so now it's closer and it looks sillier or feels stranger or whatever you want to say.
Is January 7th a doable date if we move this legislation forward?
Yes, yes, it is. I've got a chart here of our timeline. We can have nomination papers ready. If you vote it tonight, we can have nomination papers ready on the 19th. so that there's plenty of time for people who want to run for the position to take time.
Nomination papers this month?
Pardon?
Nomination papers available this month?
Yes, because
Voted at the
the
next
time we're trying to look for giving the same amount of time. Normally, we would give nomination papers the first week in January. They'd be back to us by mid-March. We're trying to give that same amount of time to people who would be running now, so that,
What is before us tonight is for the first reading.
oh, okay, okay,
So we're not making a dispositive decision tonight.
okay.
You know, we can only decide.
I would keep it at the council level for the next meeting. Then I would vote it as an emergency at the next meeting on the basis that these people need to get the nomination papers as quickly as possible, so we do not have to wait the 30 days for this to become effective. That's the process I would undertake.
Okay, so our next meeting is on the 27th of September.
Yes.
So your recommendation would be?
I would keep it at the council level. I would call it, because I do think, in fairness to candidates in democracy, they do need some time with nomination papers. The problem is if we wait another 30 days for this to become effective, it's a problem. So it needs to be voted on that day as kind of an emergency measure, right? And then we're good. We're all set.
So if we do that, if in fact the final decision is made on the 27th, nomination papers will then be ready, is that?
We will start preparing them now. I presume, I'm speaking for Jolie Sprague-Martin, who isn't here and is the one who does the work. We'll have them ready. What did you say? Your meeting is on the 27th? We will try to have them ready on the 28th. But then, of course, it has to get advertised. People have to find out that there are nomination papers, you know, and all of that sort of thing. So this is just to allow them.
It's not shortening the window at all during which the nomination papers can be in circulation for signature, is that correct?
It shortens it. It shortens it some, but I mean, I don't think it's desperately shorter. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, to that point, Mr. President, the signature requirement has been significantly reduced.
Yes.
Because of legislation.
Yes,
To what?
which is good for the people who
50?
are getting signatures, but bad for the citizens who are going to vote. Because one of the ways that citizens find out about the people that they're going to vote for is by signing their papers and talking to them and finding out who is actually running. That's a part of democracy too. And so that's been shortened. So it's 25 for a district, 50 for at large. Okay.
Can I ask through you to the town attorney? I know at our last meeting, there was some discussion that maybe the April date was possible. Can you enlighten us why it?
Yeah, so I looked into it. I tried to come up with every conceivable argument I could that this particular act was subject to the 90 days instead of the 30 days. But I found no case law that was supportive of that. And everything I found essentially said because a special act only affects one particular town, it's not subject to state referendum. So you can't take advantage of that 90-day period, because usually if a governor signs something, it can be 90 days before it's effective. And the reason for that is, just for kind of a history lesson, is in case voters want to go and try to change that, right? When it's for a specific town and it's a specific special act, they don't really allow for that. And so everything I found basically said the special act only gives you that 30 additional days for it to be effective. And I was trying to see if I could get you guys out to that April. I told you I didn't know if we could or couldn't, but I looked into it and I just don't find any conceivable way to do it. So then when I did the calculations based on the 30 days, it gets you all to March 21st. 2022. So then you're really doing an election for a month, right? Or not even. So that's how I came about this. I went through that process. Yes.
One point, this, I'm speaking about election, and I want to throw this out there. At some point, we're going to have to vote on the debt exclusion for the Bristol Plymouth, and I don't know if that's going to wait till April or whether it has to be a special election before then. So this January 7th, maybe we should do that. And the marijuana question. Special. Questions, comments? We'll have a cycle. I was looking through it. That's actually, that's actually. That's pretty. Six at large. Right.
Didn't we draw cards? Cards.
Pick your nomination papers, it will be post.
It'll tell you that, it'll tell you the term. So you know if you're you're running for this term period, right? That's how it'll be designated on the ballot. So you'll know.
I would make a recommendation that we retain as council the suggestion from the homes to consider in 2 weeks.
Whatever the procedure is, Mr. President.
Roll call vote, just to question.
Oh.
I'll make a motion to do that.
I'll second it.
And a second. Further discussion, I see.
Sure. Dr. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
And Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Rushton had to leave. He had a issue at work. 8 in favor, 0 opposed.
I'm sorry, yes, Councilman Moore.
Could I ask a procedural question? I misunderstood an earlier vote. Jason, this is maybe for you. So when we were voting on the let the voters decide, I am in favor of sending it to rules and procedures. And I thought we were voting on whether or not to bundle those two things together, not that as like the final action. So my question is that just done? Or is there an opportunity for me to amend my vote on that matter? Because I do want to be on the record showing that
So
I'm in favor.
Are you asking from the prior vote?
Yeah, from
to
the
send
vote
to
we
rules,
took,
to send to rules and procedure?
we sent it to rules and procedures and community and economic development.
Correct.
I was not in favor of community and economic development. So I misunderstood that we were voting on both. So I said, no, I didn't realize that was the last step in the process.
Yeah, it goes to committee, but you voiced your concern, and obviously, are you on either of those committees?
I'm not.
Okay, well, it will come back to the council level
Okay.
at any
All right.
rate,
So
right?
So-
So,
I'm
so
going to throw my
technically-
newish guy card on that. So
Yeah.
apologies for,
Yeah.
but I am in
So-
favor of rules and procedures.
That's it, Marcelo. I appreciate the clarification of that.
I
I will say, Mr. President, if I may, Mr. Moore is actually technically correct because we had made a sub amendment to the primary. So we should have actually been voting on the second committee first and then the joint committees.
and
as
you
the second vote.
actually could have had 3 votes, right? So, but you didn't. So, and I think the reason it's not improper is the votes were distributed in such a way that it was going to go to those committees. So that's what got voted on. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't disagree with Mr. Wood. I think parliamentary procedure wise is a little messy, but I think it did what it needs to. And sometimes you take the practicality elements in those things and.
Okay. Great.
But your point is well taken.
Thank you, Mike. Moving ahead to resolution FY 23-001, recognizing the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day. Being proposed by Councilman Moore and myself, and we proposed resolution. Whereas the town of Bridgewater supports the Bridgewater Communities for Civil Rights Committee, BCCR, by resolving that we are a community of civility where intolerant speech and behavior are unacceptable, thus ensuring our town remains a respectable respectable place to work, attend school, visit, and conduct business as expressed in the proclamation passed by the Town of Bridgewater Town Council on January 19th, 2016. And whereas the Town of Bridgewater recognizes that Bridgewater is built upon the ancestral homelands and villages of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts peoples, who have been the caretakers of these lands for millennia, and without whom the establishment of the Town of Bridgewater would not have been possible. Whereas European explorers and colonial settlers used the doctrine of discovery to justify illegally taking indigenous lands and to further justify the enslavement, dehumanization, and murder of indigenous peoples. And whereas indigenous peoples of this region and throughout the nation suffered and endured egregious acts of cruelty, exploitation, dispossession, enslavement, and genocide, and the actions and policies of European colonizers of the Americas actively destroyed and suppressed parts of those cultures. And whereas the Town of Bridgewater values the many contributions made throughout our history to our community, our state, and our country through indigenous peoples' knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the deep cultural contribution that has shaped the character of our town. And whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in Geneva in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations of the Americas. And whereas in 1990, representatives from 120 Indigenous nations at the First Continental Conference on 500 Years of Indian Resistance unanimously passed a resolution to transform Columbus Day into an occasion to strengthen the process of continental unity and struggle toward liberation, and thereby use the occasion to reveal a more accurate historical record. And whereas the United States endorsed the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples on December 16, 2010, and whereas members of the court are petitioning for legislation for the issuance of an annual proclamation by the governor to designate the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day. Whereas Massachusetts municipalities, including Amherst, Arlington, Bedford, Belmont, Brookline, Cambridge, East Hampton, Falmouth, Great Barrington, Holyoke, Marblehead, Mashpee, Maynard, Melrose, Newton, Northampton, Provincetown, Salem, Somerville, and Roslyn have already changed the holiday name to Peoples Day. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Bridgewater, on behalf of its residents, hereby acknowledges that Bridgewater is Indigenous land and honors the resilience, survivance, and continuity of the Indigenous peoples of our nation. It recognizes the second Monday of October of this year and for all years henceforth to be Indigenous Peoples Day rather than Columbus Day in the Town of Bridgewater. And be it further resolved that we call upon all residents and employees of Bridgewater to encourage schools and other institutions to use Indigenous Peoples Day to reflect upon and learn about the historical abuses and continuing struggles of the Indigenous nations, and to celebrate the foundation of the Indigenous people of this land upon which our town, state, and country were built. The full text of the resolution of the town.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion from the council?
Question.
Yes, Councilor Wood.
Is this the first reading?
Yes.
Then we can't approve it.
That's right. We're going to keep this at the council level because it doesn't require committee consideration.
So is it a vote to keep at the council level?
That's correct. We have a motion and a second, no discussion, and we're going to keep it at the council level and we'll continue this discussion on September 27th.
Roll call.
Form of a motion. I agree with that. Then why don't we have to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. George. Mr. Souza.
Yes.
And Dr. Perry.
Yes.
8 in favor, 0 opposed.
I do have one question, if I may. So, President Chase, you wrote the procedure that allows a group to request to put a banner or flag up related to I think it's a proclamation, but maybe a resolution. So if this passes, I don't know if there is a banner or flag related to this particular action, but if this passes, does this cross the threshold of that procedure where someone could make that request?
I'm trained to say that, though.
A little difficult to say. All right, for the moment, we're just moving on to citizen comments. If there are citizens who care to make a comment, kindly step forward, identify yourself, and yes.
Rebecca Flesch-Cadero, 135 Deerfield Drive. I want to thank you all for this long evening of seeing democracy in action, to quote somebody earlier tonight, and just to acknowledge my appreciation that we do live in a country and a community where we can all speak publicly. I'm very happy about the resolution, but I think the question is, why celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day? Why change the name? By celebrating the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day, we'll be joining, as President Chase just read, approximately 20 other Massachusetts municipalities who are already doing so. This name change inspires us to acknowledge that Native people were the first inhabitants of the United States and the Americas. It compels us to correct the sadly sanitized version of our past that we were taught in school. And it motivates us to reflect on the reality that colonizers forcefully took these lands, leading to the enslavement and deaths of millions of Native people and to their forced assimilation. In reference to that forced assimilation, Bridgewater Communities for Civil Rights invites you to attend our Orange Shirt Day standout in Bridgewater Center at 3 p.m. on September 30th of this year, where we wear an orange shirt to honor the children who survived the Indian residential schools and to remember those who did not. Let's take time to reflect, celebrate, and most importantly, educate ourselves. It is my hope that the town of Bridgewater will officially call the second Monday in October Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fleck. Any further comments from the public? Dr. Hunt.
Thank you for the people that brought that one up. As the grandfather of two grandsons of Indigenous, it's very important to do this. I have 2 or 3 comments. Oh, I'm Dr. Hunt. Oh, I'm in Austin Street. Thank you. Thank you very much. As to hybrid meetings, I'm on 2 committees that were meeting fully Zoom right now. But on your conversation, one thing I noted you missed is if you have a hybrid meeting, it can't be hybrid that someone can watch it and not interact. It has to be hybrid in the way that we are doing interactions now, or it has to be hybrid and Zoom where you can all interact. So whatever happens in the town in terms of hybrid meetings, it has to enable both the public participation, active participation, and observation. It can't be just, I saw the meeting, I'm going to go to YouTube and watch it. It cannot be that. Secondly, the High Street Dam. Many of you know that I followed that development very carefully. I read every document that was provided by the state. I had major comments and major concerns about that project. I have not heard since we had a small ad hoc committee meeting at which the town manager said the town will not put up any money towards that bridge removal and High Street Bridge. I'm aware of a major federal grant that was given that had over a $2 million grant match in that grant. I have not heard this council vote to accept that grant. I don't know what the status of that is. So my questions to you and to the town manager, and hopefully he'll put some kind of report out on it, is who's funding the project and how much? How much money are the taxpayers expected to pay or planning to pay? I'm going to leave it at that, only because the process is so far in. Oh, here's the other point. With respect to water, over 15% of the secondary feed to the High Street wells are encompassed within that aquifer area above the dam. So 15% of that retained water will no longer be retained in order to feed that aquifer. That was blown off by the state, quite bluntly. That's not important when I called that point out. So we have a situation where we may be reducing further inflow of surface water into groundwater in that area of the town as a result of this project. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Any further public comment? Yes, Mr. Evaldo.
I'd just like to make a couple more comments on the citizen voting ordinance. So as I mentioned earlier, the way that the order is written right now, it doesn't say anything about costs or issues that may come about. And as these committees look at either amending the order or the language in there, I think we have to be transparent to the people. If the question is going to be presented to the citizens to vote on this, they have to know all the information about what they're voting on. And that includes the pros and the cons. And so as the committees meet, please consider that. And also in terms of educating the public, I mean, yeah, we have a lot of intelligent people in our town, but how many of these people, the people in our town, take the time and effort to really study the issues that are going on with marijuana in our country? They probably don't have the time or the desire to do that. So when they go to vote, if they don't have all the information, they're going to vote what they've always voted or what they know. So I think it's incumbent upon you, just the way the state, when they do a referendum, they provide a booklet. And that booklet has the pros on one side and has the cons on the other side. The same thing should come out if we do a referendum question from this organization. We should present our voters with all the information on both sides of the equation so they can vote intelligently. So thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Hanson.
Hi, Jan Hanson, Pleasant Street again. I agree with Mr. Evaldi. I was kind of leading to that. You need to have as much information when you go, like he said, for state elections, you have the pros and cons on that ordinance. And to Mr. George was talking about, instead of doing it limited to medical for retail, have it just carte blanche, just do you want it or not, regardless. My concern is I want to see what the measures would be if that was the case, and people sadly say yes. What's the restrictions? Like, where is it going to be zoned? Is it still going to be Elm Street? Like it's always been said, but I get conflicting information of that. I just don't want an application to say, oh, I want to go here and there. There's got to be clear, concise zoning. And I hear one thing, but then I hear something else. So I want to make sure that that's clear. I don't want it to go to that, but I just want to point that out. And putting that aside, just on the water issue, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. We have too much development in this town. The more development you have, the more water that you need. We need to cut back on homes, development of homes, and maybe we see a little bit better with the water. It's no brainer. And for the election, that special election coming up, if the town can please spend the money to send things to people so they are clearly understanding the change. We need to know what our new precincts are and everything. So that needs to be sent to the voters so they know what's coming up. Not just that you got a special election, you're going to vote for these people. They should be educated as to what district are they in now, what precinct, and it can't be just on the website because not everybody can go to the website. I have trouble with the website still, and for some reason, I'm still not getting notifications for town council meetings. I get notification for all the other meetings. I don't get it for this one. So I have to kind of figure that out, and I still have a little issue with the new way, but you need to send everything to everybody so they understand what they're going to be voting for on January 7th, if you choose to do it for January 7th. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. Any further public comment? It appears not, and I'd like to invite council comment, please, with Dr. Perry.
What do we want to talk about tonight? Again, well, here we are in September. Schools are opening up again. Obviously, we just had the opening up of the brand new elementary school, so excited to see that. I just want to wish all those going back to school, all the youth starting up their sports programs and activities for the fall. Just a very successful fall season and school year, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Just want to thank everyone who showed up. It was very helpful. It's always nice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple things. I just want to say congratulations to the Mitchell Building Committee, the school committee. I was able to attend both the Mitchell Open House as well as the dedication, and I thought both of those were very well done. The open house was a lot of fun because there was just so much energy in that building. People were thoroughly impressed. The kids that were there, that were going there, were very excited to have their own building. And again, to everyone involved in that, just a great job. I just want to point out this Sunday at 9 a.m., the group that is spearheading the farmers market is actually having a cleanup at the River Landing, town River Landing, at 9 a.m. on Sunday. I would hope anyone that has the time, be it an hour or a couple hours, I looked at the weather, it's supposed to be a nice day, come down, give some help on cleaning up, and that is the basis to start the farmers market, which I'm extremely excited about. I think that's going to be a great add to the community as well. And also, I just want to point out that Are Pfas is on the 24th at the Common in Bridgewater. The Bridgewater Business Association does just a phenomenal job putting that on. So hopefully, if people around come down, visit the local vendors. I think they are going to add a few things that's very exciting as well. So hopefully, you'll be able to participate in that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilmember Ward.
Yep. I also wanted to congratulate everyone involved with the Mitchell project. And I enjoyed hearing Brad talk about all the amazing things his father used to do to prioritize students and make sure that they were getting the education they need. And so for me, in addition to hearing more stories, it is also a reminder that the Mitchell School opening is the beginning of a promise to do better. That school, historically, before we moved into here, meets less than 50% of state expectations and had among the lowest scores for math out of all of the peers, other towns around us. So this is an investment in our town and in our kids. I think we as a council should keep an eye on how that investment does over the next couple of years.
Thank you, Councilor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President. And on that note, and I know my colleagues have mentioned Mitchell School opening. There was one thing I want to add is to that I forgot who the speaker was, but the speaker said on Saturday that he was talking to some of the kids that are going to be going to that school, and something to the effect of it looked at the gentleman and said, they did all this for us. This was paid for by people of Bridgewater for us. And the guy says, yes. He said, well, they must really like us. And that stood out to me on Saturday. And what that means is when you put someone in an environment that's new, that's clean, it's much more respected. And they see the investment at that age that citizens of this town put into that building. And I think that great things will come out of that building because they're in an environment that's new, updated, and will have all the technology that it needs to move forward. So and on that also note, I think that all those were involved from the get-go. I think there's something like 80-something meetings or more regarding Mitchell School even before the vote took place. Just an outstanding job by all that were involved. On time, under budget. I know there's some punch list things that needs to be resolved, but it's great. It's great to see that building open and to walk around it. And it's great for the future of this town. And now we're on to the fire station. Absolutely. And as Councilor George brought up, the group Fire for Effect is a new veterans organization that's established here in town of Bridgewater. And they will be hosting the cleanup. They've already started to do a lot of cleanup down at the town of Manganese. I'll be joining them on Sunday to continue with the cleanup so they can move forward with their farmers market, which they hope to get 2 in October and give a trial run for this fall and hopefully do more next year. I think it's like $15 for a table, and that $15 will go towards the Fire for Effect Foundation, which will help veterans in this community. Thank you.
I've got nothing tonight. Thanks.
I'll keep it brief so we can get out of here. Just 2 things. One is I went to the open house at the New Mitchell, and it was wonderful, right? And so some people have heard me comment throughout the process, and I got to say that I'm very happy with the outcome of the project. Nice building, nice construction. As far as I know, good traffic flow, priced right, which is what we were all hoping for. And, hopefully we have some capacity now to look at other buildings like the middle school and other places and really come up with a comprehensive plan about what we're doing with our Bridgewater buildings and who said they last another 50 years. I will also say I lost a bet last week, which doesn't often happen, because I didn't cheat and look first. The question was, which is closer to the BSU apartments? Barrett's for their Friday night college night, or the new Flower and Soul pot store out on 106 in Halifax. And intuitively, I said Flower and Soul, but it's about a mile further than a college student has to go to Barrett's. They have to go 1.7 miles further to get to Flower and Soul. So the person who commented earlier about we're now surrounded is right. It's within easy reach. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Myself, I just want to thank everyone in attendance tonight. Most of them have already departed and gone home. But I actually, I very sincerely appreciate all of the comments that were brought forward. And I think that every one of us should take all of those comments to heart. I really think we do. And I think that we'll consider all the input as we move forward on various measures. I attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for the new elementary school, and I was thrilled to be there. It was a wonderful event, and the school is just marvelous. It's just, it's really just stunning. And, I hope if you haven't all had a chance to visit it, I hope that you take advantage of an opportunity to do that. And with that, I would say, I would entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved. Motion and the second. Do we have any discussion? No, seeing none.
Dr. Perry? Aye. Mr. Souza, Mr. George, Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Chase?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Columbotus, Mr. Wood?
Yes.
8-0, meeting adjourned.
It's 10:30. Oh, wait, it is 10 o'clock. It is 10. It's a 3-hour rule. Now I'm sure I gotta go home, put the trash out.